watching a super extended dolly shot play out. Besides taking inspiration from Resident Evil and Metal Gear Solid.
Alright, and it appears we are live. What's up, everybody? This is G Mr. Drew here to welcome you to another episode of the Andrew Glowczewski Experience. This is going to be episode 215. Going to continue some airplane stuff. I'm looking into fighter jets, and I'm seeing a whole lot of dope jets out there. But I'm not seeing the jet that I'm looking for. I found this one picture, and you know, I'm running into a lot of the same pictures, but this one specifically kind of has like these 8 wings going on, and maybe even a dual tail, kind of like the F-18s or something like that. I'm finding a lot of jets, and a lot of them that have like similar setups, and even setups that I like, but they're not that one. And it's like, oh man, what's up with that? So I got some ideas that I'm gonna want to try. As far as bigger ones, I looked into some. I looked into some just regular. What's it called? Vehicle design art book that I have, just to kind of revisit it again. But yeah, man, it's kind of disappointing when you can't find what you're looking for. Finding all these dope things, but none that are what I'm looking for. But I do have something I want to kind of aim towards, as far as another concept. So we'll definitely do that. Maybe if I look up fighter jet like refueling, because it was definitely a refueling image. But I feel like that's just gonna get me a bunch of other things. You know what I mean? You see, I'm kind of scrolling through these things and trying to find it, but no dice. But either way, it is August 2nd. If you are just now watching this at a later date, you can catch these things live on Twitch. You know, G Mr. Drew everywhere. And yeah, man, you can catch me there. If you don't want to do that, I upload these things on Patreon, usually right afterwards, so you can catch them there as well. And yeah, man, for most of those videos, you're gonna have to be a patron, starting at $1 a month. But starting at $3, you can get commissions by me. So go ahead, check those out. You can watch those videos there if you wish, or you could just stay watching them on YouTube. That's also cool. Yeah, I'm sorry, I started this stream premature just because I was in the middle of looking for something, but oh well. Let's see. So what do I want to call it? All right. So I'm looking up this new jet. I don't know if it's new, but it's called Rafale or Rafale. I don't know how it's pronounced. And it's something similar to the one that I saw, just because it has like these little wings in the front, and then it has the jet underneath. But I wanted to take this design and kind of bend it a bit, and maybe even introduce the other type of cockpit that I wanted to work on, like all the other ones that I had, even the 1s and 2-seaters. My 2-seater setup was still set up similar to like a one-seater setup. No, 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 no. I'm not signing off. I'm just getting started. But I wanted to try another two-seater that was more laid back and chill. So yeah, man, let's just try this out. So I'm gonna try this new shape. Let me just try to find like a decent. Why not just start with the first picture, right? So keep that there. How's it going, Nardacci? I saw that you were on there. Oh man, you rated me. That's right, you were just live. I saw you. Plane does have a good shape. Yeah, and it's a lot smoother. And it's a little wide in the front, which I think is going to help because what I want to do is just kind of have a two-seater, kind of like a car. So you have a seat and then the center console, another seat. So you have like two people sitting side by side, kind of. I have an old school Cadillac that I drive, and the seats are basically like a couch, like a sofa. And I was just like, why wouldn't every car have this ever? Like, why did we ever switch to like the bucket seats or the scoop seats? You know what I mean? Everything's all tiny. It's like, oh man, those old classic cars, they have that build. So I wanted to put up some side-by-side seats, and I think with these little wings on the front, on the front of the plane, is gonna have a nice effect. And let me see, what do I have on YouTube going? Oh yeah, I'm gonna have a bunch of Mega Man Zero uh, videos playing in the background during the stream. So I hope you guys like Mega Man.
We're getting a port for the Wii U Fatal Frame game for the Switch soon.
But yeah, I think I've watched a lot of these already.
Organic hops, organic barley, and water. It's organic, but chill about it.
But I really love Mega Man. What's up, Snake?
Welcome to Mega Man Zero, the complete story. In our effort to clear up some series that we left hanging, this is going to be the entire series for Mega Man Zero. If you learn something you didn't
Yeah, that's the way it goes, man. I have a 92 Cadillac, 92 Cadillac Brougham.
Also, I put the entire series into a
It's really nice.
I'm curious if you guys enjoy this better or us breaking it down into smaller videos so that you can go right to the parts you're missing. Let us know. We need you guys to help us decide where to bring this channel. Also, we're working on a script right now. What other games do you want? I need to know. Final Fantasy 7 is already in the works, but what about a Call of Duty Modern Warfare story?
Lower the volume a little bit. So yeah, I've been working on these planes, and the main one out of these two shapes is having jet engines on top of the wings, so the wings are on like the bottom of the plane, and then working on the other one where the wings are on top and then they slope downwards so the jets are underneath the wing. So I've been playing with these concepts, and what I like about this one that I'm about to start, this idea that kind of hit me, is this setup here can actually have both because of all the wings involved and all that crap. There we go. Let me act like I've been drawing all night, you know?
passes after Zero has defeated Copy X, and ever since then he's been walking around the desert, avoiding the Neo Arcadians. Back in Neo Arcadia, the 3 remaining Guardians have taken over control with Copy X defeated. Seal has decided that in order to stop all of the fighting, she's going to solve the energy crisis that Copy X
So I thought I could put the jet underneath the first wing and then have this back wing, have the jet run on top of it.
And he launches a full-scale assault on Neo Arcadia, of which he becomes the only survivor of the entire resistance. This leads El Piso down an even darker path, as he has decided that the only thing that can end all of this isn't fixing the energy crisis. It is.
And I'll draw a few angles of this one.
If he can control the power of the Dark Elf, he can control the power of everyone. First, El Piso goes to the temple housing the Dark Elf, but in his way is the body of the original X. So he destroys X's original body as he breaks into the temple. And then he tries to open and free the Dark Elf. But Zero arrives just in time to stop El Piso from unleashing the power of the Dark Elf back onto the world. Sadly, though, Zero has to put down El Piso. But the Dark Elf then steps forward and turns El Piso into a Cyber Elf, saving his life. The Cyber Elf of El Piso then tells Zero that the Dark Elf isn't evil, and then leaves. The Cyber Elf of X then arrives and explains what the Dark Elf is and how this is related to the Mother Elf. You see, the Mother Elf was created as the ultimate weapon against Sigma at the end of the Maverick Wars. It was created from the Maverick virus inside of Zero's body. It is basically a Sigma antibody program. Mega Man X then used the Mother Elf to finally and completely destroy the Maverick virus's negative effects. This erased Sigma from existence and ended the Maverick Wars. Following these events, Neo Arcadia was built, and the evil Dr. Wheel stole Mother Elf. After cursing her and making her into the Dark Elf, he then used her to start the Elf Wars. This period was so violent that it killed nearly 90% of the Reploids and 60% of the humans, and it took X and Zero to defeat Dr. Wheel and his Reploid Omega. After it was all over, Zero went back to sleep in the next 100 years, and X sealed the Dark Elf up in the temple, using his own body as the seal. Dark Elf and Zero then slipped into the legends, while a clone of X was created so that people wouldn't lose hope. This clone was dubbed Copy X and was the boss of the first game. After all of that is explained, the Dark Elf vanishes, calling the Reploid Omega back into action. Things are about to get far worse before they can get any better. 2 months pass, and the Resistance and Neo Arcadia actually make a truce. Seal has solved the energy crisis and is sending her findings over to Neo Arcadia. Just then, a spaceship crash lands that is emitting signals that it is the Dark Elf. So Zero has to go investigate what the heck this is. At the crash site, Zero finds and begins to fight the Reploid Omega. But back in Neo Arcadia, the new Copy X steps into command of the Neo Arcadia and appoints Dr. Wheel as his advisor. How is Copy X back? And wasn't Dr. Wheel under exile? They quickly challenge the Resistance to see who can find and capture the Dark Elf first, ending the alliance between Neo Arcadia and the Resistance. Through a series of events, Omega then captures the Dark Elf, and Dr. Wheel destroys this Copy X. That's right, the new Copy X showed up and then was immediately destroyed by his creator. Then
More planes. What's up, Nope?
Dr. Wheel seizes control of all of the Reploids. Don't worry though, Zero manages to defeat the Omega's Dark Elf enhanced form. But before he can destroy the remains of the Dark Elf enhanced Omega, a Reploid that looks exactly like Zero emerges from Omega. This Omega Zero.
Yeah, I should probably work out this cockpit a little bit more.
The Omega Zero is the true and real Zero. Just then, the Cyber Elf of X arrives and says yes.
You know, while I was on break in between streams, I was looking at like cars that I like Porsches and Phantoms, and just vintage cars. Something that I noticed I was missing was like a more wide front to fit, you know, seats side by side.
In his final moments, X walked over to Zero and he said,
So I don't know if...
I'm out of energy, and I can no longer remain in the human world. But I'm confident that you can continue to battle and protect the peace. X then faded away into what is believed to be cyberspace. With Omega Zero gone, the Dark Elf carried Zero's damaged body back to the Resistance headquarters. Then, without Dr. Wheel to control her anymore, the Dark Elf turns back into Mother Elf and flies away. But whilst almost done, Zero's mission isn't fully complete yet. Dr. Wheel still controls Neo Arcadia since he destroyed the new Copy X. Back in Neo Arcadia, the humans are beginning to flee. They are heading to the last inhabitable area for humans outside of Neo Arcadia, Area Zero. Area Zero is
So it'd be
actually the
something
remains of
like
the space
this.
colony that crashed at the end of Mega Man X5. But Zero learns of Dr. Wheel's latest plot. He wants to destroy Area Zero so that the humans have to come back to live in Neo Arcadia under his rule. Zero sets off to defeat the Maverick leaders who are staging this attack on Area Zero. But they're all distractions against Zero. You see, Dr. Wheel has actually been creating the Ragnarok, a space station that can literally blast Area Zero off the planet, killing everybody. But Dr. Wheel has a second in command, Kraft, who is in love with a human woman. And because of this love,
Who's in love with a human woman?
So instead, he uses the laser on Neo Arcadia instead, in hopes of defeating Dr. Wheel. Zero has to go up and destroy Kraft, because regardless of his plan, he did just shoot a city full of humans, and the Resistance goes in to rescue the survivors of this incident. Dr. Wheel manages to teleport away before the destruction of Neo Arcadia. And where did he go? He went to the Ragnarok space station, where he plans to just crash the whole thing in Area Zero. Zero teleports up to Ragnarok to finally end all of this. But Dr. Wheel has one more trick up his sleeve. He reveals to Zero that he's actually a human. You see, when Dr. Wheel was exiled way back in the original L-Force, he was given a regeneration suit so that he would never age, nor would he die. What this has done is allowed him to live forever in his exile. So if Zero harms Dr. Wheel, he will be considered a maverick, the term used for robots who harm humans. In the end, though, Zero doesn't care if it's justice or the
Is that what the
actions of
definition means?
It's time to end all of
Robots
this.
that harm
Zero
humans?
merges with
Maverick?
Ragnarok itself, and Zero has to fight the entire
I mean, I knew the
space
Mavericks
station.
were,
But he does.
I guess, the bad guys, but
Back on Earth, Seal, the Resistance, and the human survivors all see the explosion. They realize that this argument
yeah, I'll have to draw some more angles and try to
the
get.
entire war is over. The Maverick Wars, the Elf Wars, and there's a new war that Zero has been a part of.
Just to
It's
clarify.
all over. But Zero didn't escape. Deep down, they hope that he's still alive somewhere. And the last thing that we see as the player is we see Zero's helmet broken and on the ground. But there's no Zero nearby. Is he alive? I guess we'll find out soon enough. What's next in the timeline? Well, that would be Mega Man ZX, and then Mega Man Legends. So if you enjoyed this video and now understand the plot for Mega Man Zero, give us a like, please, and we'll see you guys next time here at Eligible Monster. It's like beer, lemonade, and summertime. Blind Boots, flavor the most.
Bomber himself. Mega Man is one of the most iconic video game characters of all time, and Capcom clearly gives him the love he deserves. Okay, maybe not. But we're gonna give him some love by chronicling the entire Mega Man timeline, all the way from the classic series to Mega Man X to Legends. Just a couple of notes. Command Mission is non-canon, and the Battle Network series is a completely separate timeline, but we'll explain more about those later. On to the robot slaying goodness. 19XX, Light and Wily Origins. The millennia-spanning saga starts out in the late 20th century with two brilliant young scientists.
Hey, that's awesome, man.
Dr. Albert Wiley are both
I'm glad this can inspire you. I get super scared when I draw things.
Sadly, that friendship morphs into a
When I draw things that aren't like characters. Even when I'm drawing characters, sometimes I'm like, ooh, if I draw them with like clothes that I don't really understand, or like, oh, how would this item work? How would they wear this sort of weapon? Things like that. It's like, oh man, I get scared about a bunch of dumb things. So yeah, even just jumping away from characters, working on these like vehicles and trying to figure out how like a seat would work. It's daunting. But yeah, so I'm glad this can inspire.
Results in two more obedient robots, Rock and Roll, a brother-sister lab-assistant housekeeper duo. Now that his domestic comforts are taken care of, Light creates 6 efficient industrial robots.
Yeah, so this is sort of the idea.
Capable of saving millions in labor costs. Because of this, Light earns the coveted Nobel Prize. That's the absolute last straw for the jealous Wiley. Using the knowledge gained from rebuilding Proto Man, Wiley hijacks
But let me,
these industrial behemoths to reprogram
find some different angles.
Light, desperate to save the world from his own creations, turns to his pure-hearted lab assistant. To stop Wiley, Rock volunteers to be cybernetically enhanced into Mega Man, an adaptable machine of justice. He makes quick work of Guts Man and the other robots' masters before defeating Wiley for the first of many times.
Guts Man.
Wiley builds 8 brand new robot masters specifically designed for combat. He almost tricks Mega Man with a nifty alien hologram. The Blue Bomber thwarts him once more. After a quick Game Boy romp recycling Robot Masters, Wily tricks Light into helping him make 8 new Masters. Now Proto Man is ready to join the fight against Mega Man. Fortunately, Proto Man feels his debt is paid to Wily and ultimately helps out our hero. He still doesn't trust Dr. Light. Oh, and Mega Man has a robot dog now named Crush. Dr. Wily then uses a time machine to go back and this time win the past 3 adventures, but history is doomed to repeat itself and he fails once again. 20XX. Mega Man series continued, 4 through 11. Soon after, Mega Man and Light are assaulted by a mysterious Russian scientist, Dr. Kostak. Turns out he's really just being blackmailed by the rascally Dr. Wily. Around this time, Wily jumps to the future.
Blackmailed.
Mega Man's future self named Pink.
Robots in the future are blackmailing each other.
Robot Punk. But again, these Game Boy ROMs are mere child's play for a seasoned robot hero. Back on the NES, Wily uses Darkman to kidnap Dr. Light and frame Proto Man. But thanks to Robobird Beat and the real Proto Man, he fails once more. More obscure adventures soon follow, including battling Rockman killer Balad, a robot alien invasion of star droids, and even an interactive movie to Amazon. Mr. X, Wily, holds a robot Olympics as a means of getting the world's strongest robots to do his bidding. But of course, Mega Man foils all of their efforts combined. At this point, Wily decides to pour all of his efforts into developing one ultimate foil for Mega Man.
So this is where the jet engine would come up above the wing.
Ashamed of Wily's incompetence, Face eventually teams up with Proto Man and Mega Man to tackle recreated past adventures in Mega Man: The Power Battle. Soon, Mega Man learns how to dribble a soccer ball as 2 giant space robots crash into Earth, giving Wily the materials and tech he needs to strike once again. But even on the PS1, Face and Wily fall to the righteous Rockman. Yeah, Rockman is Mega Man's original name. You guys already knew that. At least this time, Mega Man has some help from the intergalactic police force robot duo. Anti-hero Face has to join the light side once more as
This
Wily
is
unleashes
underneath.
robot royalty upon the world. King. This guy loses his crown quickly enough, but Wily isn't quite done tinkering. Mega Man 2, The Power Fighters, reveals the beginning developments of an even more powerful super weapon, foil to Mega Man, Zero.
Okay, so then this has to
It'll be years and years
go like
until Zero
that.
awakens. For now, Mega Man and Base team up again to fight an enemy from the future known as our
There we
Shadow
go.
in the Dimensions, before moving on to a strategy adventure against the Constellation droids. Around this time, Light develops the successor to Mega Man.
Sorry, I keep bumping the camera.
Ultimate potential. But X is also far from ready.
So JJ,
Several more decades to fully
dang dude, it's been a hot minute.
He'll never truly see his ultimate creation, so he seals X away for a long, long slumber. 8 more of Light's industrial robots are nearing the end of their government-issued life cycle and are about to be decommissioned. So Wily manipulates them to rebel, framing Light in the process. Returning to his retro roots, Mega Man thwarts Wily again with the help of Proto Man. It isn't long before a new kind of threat emerges: Robo-Enza, a pandemic designed by Wily.
There we go.
Community,
See, the thing about this jet, what it's missing that the other one that I liked had was 2 wings coming off of the back end as well. So it was like 8, almost like 8 wings altogether. This one has, what, 5? Yeah, this one has 5.
Wily hijacks 8 more robots and implements the system, leaving Mega Man no option but to double gear himself and take the upgraded robot masters and Nefarious Doctor down one final time. 21XX, Mega Man X series. By the 22nd century, Wily, Light, and Mega Man are dead and forgotten, but archaeologist Dr. Kane suddenly makes a startling discovery. It's X. Kane is able to use the lost technology within X to reverse engineer a new breed of advanced robots, the Reploids. These replications of X are meant to be AI-enhanced servants, but occasionally, the free will within these Reploids causes them to go rogue. To combat these maverick Reploids, Maverick Hunters are developed as bounty hunters of sorts. Over time, Sigma emerges as the Alpha Maverick Hunter, the dog of the Maverick Hunters, if you will. More dispensable Maverick Hunters uncover an
There we
abandoned
go.
Wily lab, where they awaken the incubated superweapon Zero. The miscellaneous Reploids stand no chance against Zero, so Sigma's crew was called in for the fight. It's a hard-fought battle, and Sigma...
Yes, I was reading this book about doing these sort of designs, and they were like, yeah, don't use a pencil, you don't want to erase. They're like, just use a pen and draw lightly. I was like, okay. Okay. But they are wildin'.
He's nearing maturity when suddenly the Maverick virus takes hold of Sigma. fully corrupting his programming and turning him against humanity. Sigma convinces the Reploids that their human creators are holding them back, causing widespread revolt. But Zero and X remain uncorrupted. Zero springs into action, with X eager to help. The naive youngster is soon beaten down by Sigma's right hand, Vile. Zero bails him out, and X goes on to take down 8 defected
Oh yeah, Mega Man
Sigma becoming
X.
as powerful as Zero, fulfilling his destiny as the robot with the ultimate potential. After Zero sacrifices himself to help destroy the maniacal Vile, X finally defeats Sigma all on his own. A few months later, X is with various X-Hunters who try to steal Zero's scattered body parts. X beats them to the punch, reassembling his friend and defeating Copy Zero and Neo Sigma. If you don't
You start realizing like, oh, maybe I can't draw airplanes.
It's a pretty extreme situation. Robot scientist Dr. Doppler finally creates a cure for the Maverick virus, so all infected Reploids are gathered to a robot utopia. Of course, it's all a ruse. The cure is fake. Sigma is controlling Doppler, and this newly amassed army attack the Maverick Hunters. But even this army and the Nightmare Police stand no chance against the reunited X and Zero. Next up is a fun island adventure to prevent Reploid erasure all over the world. Again, super extreme situations our heroes are dealing with. A military force of Reploids known as Repliforce is established, but soon framed for Magma Dragoon's destruction of Sky Lagoon City. Shockingly, Sigma is the puppet master behind this giant Repliforce war of Maverick Hunters versus Repliforce. This whole misunderstanding is resolved after a noble sacrifice by the Repliforce general named General. After constructing pretty much all of this century's problems, Dr. Kane decides to call it quits and retire. But before he does, he creates one more Reploid to lead the Maverick Hunters, Cygnus. By this point, the world is colonizing the neighboring space near Earth. And everything's pretty rad until the artificial gravity system of one of these colonies, Eurasia, gets corrupted by a new virus and starts careening towards Earth. Oh yeah, and Sigma's back again, and he's unleashed the Sigma virus once more. When the colony collides with Earth, the Sigma virus mixes with the colony virus, creating something called the Zero virus. Oh, and the resulting chaos turns Zero Maverick. Maybe. Yeah, PS1 really stepped up the plot. X fights his friend to snap him out of it, but Sigma shows up to ruin everyone's day. Zero nobly sacrifices himself to save X, proving his pure heart and buying enough time for Kane's hologram to save X a la Obi-Wan Kenobi. A few weeks later, and humans are forced to live.
I mean, sketching with pen is cool, but like usually like maybe October for like Inktober would be the time to like do it, I guess. You know? Where it's like, okay, it's October, I'm gonna be inking. So even if it does end up like trash, it's like, it's only for the month. But yeah, to just do it randomly.
So when X abandons his peacekeeping duties, the vigilante group Red Alert Syndicate picks up the slack. Axel, a brash young Red Alert member, ditches their violent ways to join up with the Maverick Hunters instead. When the Syndicate demands he be returned, violence breaks out. Oh, and it turns out that Sigma has been manipulating Red Alert the whole time. Zero, Axel, and for what feels like forever, X storm the Red Alert base. Red Alert's leader, Red, overcomes his horrible case of Sigma blackmail and redeems himself with a sacrifice before the big bad gets taken down for the 7th or 9th time or whatever. Axel mourns the loss of Red and officially becomes a Maverick Hunter. A year or so later, Vile returns to attack Jacob's Tower, a giant orbital elevator being constructed by the next generation of data-copying Reploids. Sigma plans to infect them all with his own DNA, granting them all his unique ability to turn Maverick but keep their free will. Well, this time, Sigma is actually the puppet. This diabolical plan was actually hatched by Jacob's Tower director and next-generation Reploid, Lumine. Axel, Zero, and X defeat this mastermind and Sigma for the final time, and it all goes down on the moon. And then, the gang takes a quick trip to cyberspace via smartphones. Well, in Japan at least. Zero steals himself away for the safety of mankind, while his mind is studied to create cyber elves, sentient cyber beings capable of enhancing the abilities of any Reploid. That's how the powerful Mother Elf gets created.
Yeah, I had a really good Inktober a while back. I actually have a piece that I drew that's one of my favorites. Every time I revisit it and see it again, I'm like, oh, I forgot about that. It was like a really good picture. I don't know if I have it right available, like right in front of me. Where is that book?
Lyle uses Zero's original body to create the superweapon Devil Reploid Omega. Copy Zero and X.
Let me see. It's in one of my sketchbooks.
Omega and the bloodshed. Now, Zero really feels responsible.
Oh, it's in there.
His advanced mind and body led to all this death, so he seals himself away once more to give the world a chance to recover. 22XX, Mega Man Zero series. Okay, so Mega Man X
So, yeah.
takes place in the 20th century, where the Maverick Hunters have to strategically battle a band of rebelling recorders of the
Oh, there we go. Sorry, had to dig this out from a whole pile. So I have this old sketchbook of mine, and it's full of a bunch of crap. But I had one Inktober that was going pretty well, pretty decent. So you can see I started, okay, so 2017, this is on October 1st, so Inktober. This was back when Tankman Luffy was still a thing. And then just some random, these things I drew back when I lived at the beach, like in a small studio. And these are all just straight inks, there's no pencils involved. You could even see the old sketching lines behind them. Oh snap, here's a picture of really bad Zero, I believe. Funny enough, we're watching a Zero video, or a Mega Man video. There's a really bad Zero right here. Loosely holding a lightsaber, blaster pointed at you. Is probably like that chick from Suicide Squad, Katana or something. I don't know. This was a live band that was playing that night. This is the one that I like. This is the one I was talking about. I did this picture of Sanji. So every time I think about drawing in ink, I always think about this picture. Because this one ended up really nice. Just off of like, you know, no pencils and just straight up drawing. So you got, you know, Blackfoot Sanji or Redfoot Sanji, whatever it is. And you have him with his iron mask. This is probably what was happening in the anime 3 years ago. So yeah, back when he was like the boy in the iron mask, and then his two dads, like his real dad and then his adopted dad that he did the restaurant with, the Barati. I always liked this picture. But this one was just like a random Inktober night that I just drew, and I really liked Sanji's backstory, so I drew it. And let's see, some Kill la Kill, when Mako would be like, what was it? Hallelujah. And then she would do some shit. What's her name? Morgan from Darkstalkers, Cuphead stuff. I drew like a realistic Cuphead, I think, something like that. Some Fat Man Beyond, Fat Man on Batman. Some Broly, I think it's like Super Saiyan 5 or Super Saiyan Blue Broly, something like that. And then
Alfred's actually the father/creator of this new protagonist, and he plans to hyper-accelerate Reploid and human advancement as part of
this is kind of like Sniper Wolf from Metal Gear 4. I remember that was the inspiration, but I just drew like a wolf monster with a chick with a sniper scope on top. And then instead of a camera for a head, like in the game, I drew the camera eye here on the edge of the tail.
I really doubt this cliffhanger is going to be resolved anytime soon. Several thousand years later,
Kind of dope.
fast forward a few millennia to utopian
And I met with Blizzard, and I talked to an artist, and he was talking to me about some stuff. And here's a, everyone's always, well, I shouldn't say everyone's always asking me about my main character, but these are some of the first sketches that I made of my main character for the show that I'm working on. I think I've changed the idea since this, but this is still kind of one of the founding images to my main character. So yeah, probably the first time I'm showing anything like this on stream. I know people ask me sometimes, they're like, "Where's your main character? Have you drawn him yet?" And it's like, I don't show that stuff. So here's like a special sneak preview, just because. But yeah, I remember some employee over at Blizzard. I was talking to him, trying to get a job, and I remember he drew me these things. So I don't know. I keep those in there. I was listening to State of the Culture. No, I forget what it's called at this point. But I was watching the show and someone made a joke, so I drew it. This is another character. So this is actually when I started working on the characters. It was during this Inktober. I was in the middle of writing, and I kind of got sick of writing for a little bit, so I wanted to draw. And I love this character's design. He has that Star Trek. Yeah, man. So this is like special sneak preview into the first drawings of some of these characters, and we're talking, almost over 3 years ago. What are we in 2021? So it's almost 4 years ago now. Back when I was still writing. So yeah, some fun stuff, man. And again, these are all inks, no pencils. So, drawing with ink is, it's a thing. It can be done. And you can have some good results sometimes. And then I hit this character, and then I started running into struggles and problems. Oh, man. And then I had this guy. I started having fun again. But yeah, it's a fun little old sketchbook. Sarah is overwhelmed by Yura and Volna and eventually has a change of heart. I mean, after all, the master clearly didn't want the Carbons to die, and come on. Yeah. So, hope you guys enjoyed that little brief look into 4 years ago, me working on this stuff, long before I started this stream. And back when I was like, all right, let me start drawing these characters that I'm writing about now. And then I started drawing them. I hope the main character, it doesn't look too disappointing. Someone said, oh, he looks a lot like you. And I was like, ah. So then I started bending his design. And yeah, the main character is basically going to reflect me. Because why not? And yeah. It was interesting. I wasn't expecting that to happen. I forgot that those drawings were there during that Inktober.
The Mega Man Zero series did an excellent job elevating the mechanics from the Mega Man X games, all the while crafting an experience that stood on its own. Zero 1 has its ups and downs, Zero 2 is a very solid improvement, and Zero 3 perfected that. Zero 4 stumbled a bit, but still came out a good game. So at the end of the day, Indie Creates really proved themselves as capable Mega Man side-scrolling developers. The Game Boy Advance's lifespan was up, and the Nintendo DS was released. So Indie Creates was brought back for the follow-up to Zero 4, but Zero 4 ended with all the Maverick, Elf, human versus machine conflicts resolved as Zero is dead, and CL promised to finally make that utopia the Dark Light had envisioned hundreds of years prior. So it couldn't directly be a Zero 5, but a game that evolved the gameplay for the new console, and took place 200 years after Zero 4 in the new Mega Man series, Mega Man ZX. You see, of all the Mega Man franchises in the main where I have the least amount of experience. I had played all the classics, then LP'd them all in 2016. The X games, which of course I played a scary amount of times. The Zero series I played a respectable amount of times and just reviewed them. And then there's Legends. I've played both games twice, but here with ZX and ZX Advent, I've only played both of these games once before this, as I said in 01. I got my copies back in 2015 alongside the Zero.
Still laughing about that. That one time I did really good? Yeah, let's do that again. That's every time, right? Never quite lives up to the expectation.
Zero wanted integrated degree of interconnectivity between areas, but ZX is taking that to the logical extreme. Let's see how Mega Man ZX turned out by starting with the story. Right off the bat, it's important to know how Mega Man ZX, much like the Pokemon games, have two playthroughs. One where you play as the boy, Vent, and the girl, Ale. There's very minimal difference between the two playthroughs since they play the exact same. Ale crawls through tight spaces faster than Vent does, and the dialogue is slightly altered to reflect Ale's softer, more inquisitive personality over Vent's, but the story arc is pretty much identical. The story of the two playthroughs takes a different turn in ZX Advent. We can discuss that then. At the start of the game, work for Jiro Express, a delivery company, your boss, Jiro, a male who 100% doesn't look the part. In this painstaking 10-minute long cutscene that is indeed unskippable, we learn that Ventil's mother had died in a Maverick raid in an amusement park 10 years ago, turning them into orphans now being looked after by Jiro. In between the Zero and ZX games, energy has indeed been brought back as the Mega Man world looks like an evolved version of the one we saw in the X series as opposed to being the hellscape we saw in the Zero series, with constant reminder of the renewable energy source provided by Slither Inc. and its CEO, Serpent, in the background of most areas. No better example than the X1 intro stage being once again playable, and usually this is done to cut costs or cater to nostalgia, but this time around it shows how far the Mega Man world has come since then. Jiro Express is transporting a valuable package until Mavericks are undertaken by force, they go over the cliff, and meet Prairie, who is one you're delivering the package to. The package is Biometal X. What's a biometal? In all seriousness, the biometals are basically AIs that have the intelligence of specific people.
Yeah,
And
see, I wish there was like a wing coming out here.
All while having the AI person speak with you.
Well, I'll find that jet one day.
Showing up on the scene as Model X joins with Ventil to stop it. But Model X's only justification after the fact being, well,
Give me
you
a
need
second.
help to save those people, and I gave it to you. What more reason do I need? Which is very in character for Mega Man X. With all the other biometals being in character to who they're supposed to be as well. Prairie is the leader of the Guardians. The organization formed the way to the Resistance as they saved the world post-04. Mavericks are still an issue which the Guardians protect against. Jiro was also in possession of Model Z, which as you can imagine bestows him the power of Zero, as Ventil and Jiro help out the Guardians with a Maverick raid near Slither Inc. And it's revealed that Serpent is the villain alongside his Guardians, Prometheus and Pandora. He's causing the Maverick raid so that he can finally unlock the power of Mega Man Model W and do whatever he wishes, which means Serpent was indirectly responsible for the death of Ventil's mother. He's also amassing a wide collection of cyber elves to use them as energy, which is terrible.
Alright.
What's worse is that he's grounding people up to turn them into cyber elves, which is even worse. But anyway, Jiro dies in this encounter and gives Ventil Model Z a merge with Model X to create Model ZX, a combination of X and Zero's power. To stop Serpent and Model W, we need to find the other biometals with the spirit of the Guardians from the Zero games, Tarkuya, Vecnir, Leviathan, and Phantom. We also learned that Perry's sister was the leader of the Guardians, her sister being CL from Mega Man Zero. Prairie is Alouette, who's just older with a name change. CL was the one who developed the biometal technology as you might have expected. In one of the few instances of divergent storytelling, in Vent's playthrough, he learns about Dr. Lyle and Ragnarok and how the events of 04 led into this game. And in Ale's playthrough, she learns about the research at Slither Inc. on Model W that turned Serpent into the villain he is now, as he was the one most interested in researching the subject. Not a big deal, but good for replay value. In the climax, it seems that Prometheus and Pandora don't actually care about Serpent at all and just want Model W to wreak havoc. Not something we can talk about in this game, as these two have more to do in ZX Advent. But regardless, Ventil stops Serpent and Model W, saves the day, and joins the Guardians full time. And that's about it. I do not find the story particularly interesting, since I just told you all the noteworthy things that happen in it. And while follow-ups to Mega Man Zero are interesting, the biometals are a really neat idea since technology in the Mega Man world has come that far. Since, I said in 04 that the death of Zero and the destruction of Neo Arcadia was a big advancement in the relationship between humans and Reploids, and now 200 years later, humans are merging with Reploid DNA to the point where barely anyone acknowledges the distinction between the two. It's also funny to think that, again, Dr. Light created Mega Man Mega Man is like a lineage, with each biometal being a Mega Man in its own right. But beyond that, this game has a lot of dialogue I just don't find to be interesting. I mean, during that entire plot dump, I couldn't analyze anything because it's not interesting, again. Especially the boss dialogue, as they spout on about Serpent's Rule is the
All right.
way to go. Ventil potentially having been destined to join
Yeah,
the
we'll do, man.
setting back Serpent's
I don't know how long I'll be drawing planes, but
I mean, ever since Sigma and the Mavericks in X1,
you know, you catch some sleep, man. Sweet dreams and all that. For sure, man. Dream about some airplanes.
I mean, we talk about something new if these bosses are gonna have something to say. On the whole, the story just feels like it's going through the Mega Man motions. Nothing as laughable as the PS2 X titles, but still, it just goes in one ear and out the other, leaving me pretty bored while watching the story play out, even if it's fine on paper. Each Mega Man Zero game was a step up from the last in the visual department, and Mega Man ZX is on a whole new console, and they did not disappoint. The various foregrounds and backgrounds not only have the wide selection of colors, but they also feel far more detailed, especially in the mountainous areas. They also have small details moving in the background, like flickering lights and other machines. And while this is extremely primitive now, I just think it's cool how Indie Creates tried their best with the hardware they were given to improve their work when a game like Zero 4 would totally cut it as far as early DX standards were concerned. Another great thing with the console shift is that we have all new sprites to look at. Z-Saber slashing, fire and pellets with the X-Buster has never felt and looked so smooth before, and it's great. The biometals for the Guardians as well animate very smoothly as they function exactly how you expect them to in the Zero series. Bosses have seen an increase in movement as well, as they come in all sorts of varieties and animate very smoothly. The soundtrack in Zero 4 was soul-crushing to listen to, since it was composed incredibly well, but then on GBA it just sounded awful. Mega Man ZX is here to rectify the mistakes made in the last game, with easily the best soundtrack this marathon has seen yet. With scenery this varied, the soundtrack followed suit, fitting the different environments of, say, the grasslands, the Guardian HQ, the city, the mountains, the lake, and so on, with a respectable length before looping. I mean, why crowd along when you can listen?
It's not a bad soundtrack. It's funny, I was just thinking about his soundtracks before I started the stream. You know, I have a friend who makes music, and I often think about like talking to him in my head and just being like, man, I wonder if I could ever be in a position to ask him if he would be interested in working on a soundtrack for, you know, animations and things like that. If I just give him some course, give him some obviously incentive, but I mean, like, give him some rough sounds of, like, you know, something that sounds like this, and then just let him go.
The same three control types are back when it comes to switching weapons. I'm not a Type C fan myself, if you recall from the last four reviews. But yeah, Marvel Z is just Zero's personality and body, so it makes sense that it plays just like him. There's no star system, so the Z-Saber and Buster all have their abilities at default, and also the Z-Buster has returned to its original properties from Zero 1 to Zero 3. Before Model X and Model Z merged, you played with only Model X, and this was such a rush of nostalgia, as this is basically X from X2. We can dash, wall jump, and use the X2 arm parts for a double charge shot. You'll lose access to X if you become a Model ZX, but the ZX Buster comes with all the properties that the X Buster had anyway, so it's not a big deal. As Model ZX, you don't acquire any extra weapons, though. Yeah, there's no shield boomerang, no rod, and no zero knuckle. It's just the bare essentials, which I don't mind because of the biometals. When it comes to increasing the variety in combat, the 4 extra biometals completely mop the floor with any of the extra weapons in the Zero series, and that includes the recoil rod. Instead of just giving you a different style of attack, the biometals allow you to turn into the Guardians, Model H, Model F, Model L, and Model P, and these just flat out change the gameplay style itself. They all have the same basic controls, dash, wall jump, and so on, but the extra abilities they do have is where it makes the most impact. Model H uses Harpuya's 2 sabers to great effect, and they may only use one swing at a time, but switching between the two is fast, and while you use one, the other one builds up energy for the charge shot, just screen, Model H displays the health bar of the enemy you're currently fighting, which can be quick if your enemy's weak to electricity, but can still be handy nonetheless for mini-bosses. But the best part, bar none, is Model H's glide ability to dash vertically and horizontally in the air, greatly extending your jump time. For that reason alone, Model H was always one of my top picks. Model F allows you to shoot an infinite amount of fireballs from either gun and use a charged
There we
attack
go.
to break certain obstacles, which wouldn't be anything too special if not for the customization you get at the bottom screen, as you can determine the arc of the fireballs with each arm. You can also shoot upward while standing still, which is not something I usually think to do, but it comes in handy nonetheless. I don't use Model F too often, but it's still really good. Model L can only do a tiny slash attack on the ground, but underwater you can swim and dash freely and do a spinning slash attack with phenomenal range that wrecks bosses. All three of these forms have the elemental chips from 01 to 03, which means the simple but effective weakness chain returns without a hassle, just how I like it. But there's also Model P, which is fine, but it's my least favorite. You can handily throw ninja stars and latch onto the ceilings, which are good abilities, and the bottom screen also displays powers from the near vicinity, but similar to X2 as tech cards, you have to think of that while playing the game, and I just don't, since the other four biometals offer me more from platforming, offense, and defense. E-crystals are back, and you use them at the Guardian's HQ to increase the weapon energy meter for the four Guardian biometals, which I do like. And they're also frequently dropped by enemies too, so you'll never be starved for them like in 01 or 04. But back on subject, Model P not being great isn't a huge sin though, since all in all, these five forms just make
Let me
it
see.
so varying what you do with
See if I can
massive
draw like a main idea of what this looks like. Like a simple idea. So we have the jet, and then we have the engine. It's underneath this wing.
NT Creates decided to expand upon their idea from 01 and make ZX a full Metroidvania. I'd like to explain what that was, but I feel like you don't need me to say it. If you're curious, though, I've dabbled in a couple of Metroid games. I'll only have maybe Zero Mission, AM2R, and Super Metroid. For a lot of people, though, Metroidvania games offer such a unique appeal with the tightly designed, interconnected overworld that you gradually come to know and explore the depths of as you alone travel through this space, gaining more and more powers to tackle the unknown hordes of enemies awaiting. Games like this kind of stress me out, since with each and every diverging pathway, I feel like they either doing something wrong or made the right choice. Because of that, I can say comfortably that I like these kinds of games if I know the general area of where I'm going.
There's the wing above, and then the wing below it.
Detail, just as long as I know what good progress is versus progress off the beaten path, if that makes any sense. Honestly, growing your strength, exploring areas, and becoming familiar with them was a core part of my love for the X series back in 2015. And just more of a bite-sized scale, which is definitely my liking as opposed to a big map. Anyway, as Metroidvania, Mega Man ZX falls on its face pretty hard. The map in the pause menu is pretty unhelpful since it only expands when you go to a new location, rather than having a map room or something like that. Which, by the way, why are there in-between rooms that save and transport, and then some...
So yeah, I'd say that's pretty accurate as to the shape overall.
ZX has several missions to accomplish, and the game will tell you which area it is, like Area K or Area M, but
I wonder if that should be like that, and if
reason for the location placement, since Area M is
that should be
Area A with other examples found throughout. But if the thrill of the hunt is something you care about, then that's fine. You have every right to enjoy
that
that.
instead.
I personally don't, so onto the internet I go. When you finally reach your destination, how is the level design? I'm not sure how to put this. The level design is functional with many moments I really like. You take the water area with Model L. It's great to time your swimming to the rising and lowering water with spikes underneath and above. Other times it's standard Mega Man X fare as you slash enemies, but at its worst, it's kind of annoying. Like enemies lurk all over the screen and I'm trying to time my jumps or enemies flying in from off screen, which is something NT Creates is a really big fan of. And with the lesser screen space in the DS, this could become death by 1,000 paper clips. Overall, I don't have too much to say about the level design or item placement since it's just so for me. This is how I feel about ZX in a lot of ways. So much going for it, but at the same time, it kind of feels But before I continue talking about that, there are some aspects of ZX that I think were flat out terrible, as opposed to kind of there. Starting with lives. Yeah, I complained heavily about retry chips in 01, praised the lives being back in 02, and now I'm advocating for them to just be out of the series in general. With level-based games, losing all your lives when you're starting the stage again, but I find this to be pretty archaic nowadays. But they had a simple function in the olden days of platforming. Lives have no place in a Metroidvania, and even I can tell you that after having beaten 3. You only get 2 lives at default, and these are extremely easy to lose since there are a lot of spikes and pits in ZX. Combined with the enemies flying from off-screen discussion from earlier, and I'm upset. Imagine this, you reach the end of a mission and you die from some garbage you couldn't see coming, you lost all your arbitrary lives, and now you must either A, reload the save file, so here's hoping you found a save room pretty close to the mission start point, because if not, you just start the mission again, which is like 6 areas ago. Backtrack to the entire map you just found your way through before, get another chance to do the mission again. See, this is pointless padding and tedium, which turns me off completely to the whole idea of big open spaces where I don't know where exactly I'm going, since it's possible to lose all my lives and go back, or just barely find the mission and die right away. You can do the entire commute all over again. I mean, practice makes perfect, but I just don't care. This sort of gameplay just does not interest me in the slightest, making me really not interested in playing it, because by the end of ZX, I was really worn out. Another reason for that was the returning sub-tanks. I got all the health expansions, which definitely helped out, but with the 2 sub-tanks I had, I never was not in a position where I needed to fill them up because of high damage output from enemies. Sub-tanks are a subject I'm very mixed on. I feel like there are good ways and bad ways to handle them. In theory, I like them since they serve as a permanent option for obtaining health. However, at their worst, this can really drag out the pace of the game. In X1 to X3, debatably 4, I always felt comfortable with sub-tanks since X1 had numerous spots to quickly fill them up, X2 had given us the silk shot instant charge method, X3 had frost shield making all the enemies instantly drop health, X4 had the spot and frost wall resist stage where you can grab a few health ups, but you need like 4 visits to actually fill them. X4 was the game where the final boss and boss rush returned to the same stage, which certainly didn't help matters much. X5 didn't have a grind spot, which made the game even more tedious, and X6 dropped health like candy. I didn't mind sub-tanks from the Zero series, and so on. See what I'm getting at here? The ease of access to health makes or breaks the sub-tank. At its best, it's better than E-tanks with permanent availability, and at its worst, it's way worse than E-tanks as we're standing here hitting enemies for several
Let me remind myself. I made a couple cruiser seats, so basically I kind of want to take this concept and turn it into a 2-seater. So you can see this sort of profile view and take this angle. Okay, so if that's what I want to do, then so it's like that. Goes all the way down, then up. Okay.
Omega was such an easy and underwhelming boss fight in 03, and ZX rectified that mistake by giving Omega all the same abilities as 03, but with even higher damage output and less damage input, meaning you can't completely ruin the fight with the 1000 slash. Defeating Omega and ZX was like an accomplishment. How it should have felt at the end of 03, and you're rewarded handsomely with Model O, a fully playable Omega with unlimited attack power. And just for old time's sake, let's listen to the Cannonball remix one more time. Have I mentioned that boss rushes suck? I have. Well, have I also mentioned that boss rushes in the same stage as the final boss suck? I have. Is this funny yet? I mean, really though, I have nothing left to say about this since I've complained about it in 11 Mega Man games now, and this brings that number up to 12. Take it away, Omega. The final boss was certain.
I'm all drawing off camera, sorry.
The punishment of doing this crappy boss rush all over again.
Yeah.
What more can I say? Let's wrap this up. Mega Man 3 is the game I had finished only once in 2016, and since then I barely thought about it. Despite that, Mega Man ZX didn't surprise me in the slightest. I mean, the levels are okay, it's a little generic and quickly forgotten. The story is decent, but something I'm probably going to forget once I'm done with this video. I really love the bio medals, and I really hate the open world and live system. Not so much that ZX is some kind of bad game. No, I liked it, and I think if you like Mega Man X, and especially Mega Man Zero, you'll probably like ZX. But for a game that did so much new with the Mega Man formula, I oddly found the game to be going through the motions at the exact same time. Games like this are the ones I have the least to say about in the conclusion, because I feel like the review pretty much speaks for itself at this point. Don't think I don't like ZX, as it does have a quality story, a charming cast of characters, and appealing visuals, good soundtrack, same great controls, and if we're looking at this game from a neutral quality standpoint, it's definitely still better than 01, and probably 04 even, but it's just not the kind of game that screams from the shelf to be played again, if that makes any sense. In short, it's a one and done. But before I drag out the video by saying the same thing over and over, I'll say this. ZX Advent for the Nintendo DS. Beyond ending with a cliffhanger, how does Indie Create's final Mega Man game in this style fare? Well, find out next week in the conclusion of the
Alright, so we have our
Mega Man
seats,
ZX Advent.
and then let's see. Just familiarize myself. That's what I thought. Okay, so yeah, the foot pedals are all the way back up there.
As I'm sure goes without saying, I love the Mega Man X series. The endearing cast of main characters, the smooth gameplay, precision platforming, challenging boss fights, satisfying moveset, a good set of unlockables. Throughout the years from 2015 to now, I cannot tell you how much fun I've drawn from X1 to X4. I know X3 is a bit more controversial, but for me, I can play all of these 4 games front to back any day of the week. I've also, of course, played the latter X games ad nauseum as well, to play the shaky ground in terms of quality. I own multiple copies of every game, and why not? I always do that for the game franchises I appreciate. The Mega Man X games really helped me out back in 2015, and of course, if I was getting into these games, it only makes sense to dabble into the other Mega Man franchises that exist, right? Well, shortly after my first playthrough of Mega Man X5 wrapped up, I got my hands on the Mega Man Zero collection for the Nintendo DS. The 2 ZX games that followed it, as well as the Anniversary collection, which contained the first 8 classic titles. I'm most known for the all-inclusive Mega Man X retrospective of 2016 and 17, and ever since, there's been one burning request that is closely followed behind me wherever I go. That being the leap from the Mega Man X games to the next series in the chronology, the Mega Man Zero games. After a year and a half with some side X videos in the meantime, we're finally here to tackle Mega Man Zero 1, released for the Game Boy Advance in the year 2002, and re-released alongside 3 sequels for the DS in 2010. We aren't just doing this game. As promised in the 2018 update video that you all totally watched and learned from, I'm also following this up with Mega Man Zero 2, then Zero 3, then of course Zero 4. But since the Zero series is pretty short in comparison to the X series, I tossed in a bonus. The Mega Man Zero game was developed by Indie Creates, all 4 being released to the GBA. But when a leak to the Nintendo DS happened, they were at the helm with the next Mega Man series, Mega Man ZX, which only consists of 2 games, ZX and ZX Advent, both of which are basically Zero 5 and Zero 6. So in this grand Mega Man Zero marathon, we're tackling all 4 Mega Man Zero games, and I'll be bringing up the Zero collection, Never Relevant, and the 2 ZX games, all released in rapid succession as not keep you guys waiting. As I said, Mega Man Zero 1 was my first exposure to the larger Mega Man series following X5, and I didn't really know what to expect. But I noticed right off the bat that I had 2 health bars and all my potential moves were unlocked. That's when I realized just how much easier the easy scenario was. I still died a lot though, but we can most certainly address that later. I played all of the Zero games in 2015, and I enjoyed them all quite a bit, with Zeros 1 and 4 coming out as my favorites. This doesn't hold true anymore, but I figured I'd mention that. Since then, I've played all of these games a few times over, nothing religious like Mega Man X, but I've always had respect and admiration for the Zero series. I've only ever beaten both ZX and ZX Advent once each before this marathon, so it'll be interesting to see where I stand on those 2. But now it's time to give the spotlight to Zero in his own series. I mean, really, this was coming for a while. Going back to X1 when Zero was supposed to be the main character, the revival in X2, the limited playability in X3, fully playable character status in X4, and also in X4 is when the series became a lot more about Zero in general until Axel came along in X7. Keiji Inafune has always had a thing for Zero, and now he's showing that off with no shame. But enough of this, let's boot up the game. Mega Man Zero 1 opens with a really cool scene as this small group is seen running from a much larger power. These robots that look like X are chasing them down until the big mechanoids come in and really make some waves by killing one smart group. Funny thing is, the game didn't even need any dialogue to convey the power difference here. It's like the opening of Star Wars. It just begins, we can clearly see how small in scale our side is and how much more powerful these guys are. The girl whose name is CL alongside 2 other resistance members are cornered, but they have reached their target. The last remnant of Zero, whom has been asleep for 100 years at this point. The resistance members all die, and as the Xbox get closer and closer, CL sends her fairy thing into Zero, which completely restores him. All she has to say is, Zero, help me. And that's how the game begins, with Zero ripping through the enemy force that just killed off the whole Resistance crew. That's how you open a game. Now we can clearly see why the Resistance wanted Zero, because they all just got slaughtered by these guys, and here's Zero and his arsenal can do it, no problem. Zero is also granted the Z-Saber by a mysterious light energy who disappears from the story for the time being. With the game tossing us right in like that, it's time for some backstory. Most of which shall be revealed in later Zero games, but in the context of this game, in between the X games and this game, X and Zero still participated in battle after battle in the Maverick Wars until a grand city named Neo Arcadia was built for humans and reploids to live in peace. In fact, by Mega Man Zero, technology has increased to such a degree where the point where you can't even really tell the difference between the two anymore. This is where Zero's ending in X6 comes in. Zero had himself sealed for 100 years, and it was during that time when Zero was analyzed. Through his systems, the cyber technology was created. That was the very thing I was following CL earlier. Think Dr. Light from the PS1 X games. That's what a cyber elf is. X was and still is the leader of Neo Arcadia, and it was his forces that went after the Resistance earlier, since X has now grown so powerful that in his attempt to bring peace once and for all, he's now executing anyone who deems Maverick to sustain his peace. Sounds insanely uncharacteristic, right? Well, Zero does a plethora of missions to set back Neo Arcadia and allow the Resistance to gain some footing, and along the way he battles against the four guardians of Master X, both being Phantom, Fafnir, Harkuya, and Leviathan, all created in X's image. Once all the stages are complete, it's revealed that X actually disappeared a long time ago, and has been gone for a while, and in his absence, CL, when she once lived in Neo Arcadia, built this replica of X who would act just like the original, but he's merely a copy who struck out on his own vision of peace. We'll call him Copy X. That's when CL and her allies formed the Resistance, and they were on their last leg until they found Zero. Following this, a cyber elf appears and grants Zero access codes to Neo Arcadia, and that's how he gets to the castle stage. That sounds a bit coincidental, but this cyber elf is the one true X. We know that since he says, "Go and exterminate that copy of me with extreme prejudice." Like, damn, X is pissed off what Copy X has done to all those innocent reploids. X is also the one who gave Zero the Z-Saber in the intro stage, since as we all know, he's had it since the end of X5. So X has existed as a Dr. Light figure for all this time, but he hasn't really been able to do anything about it since he didn't have a body. And now Zero being back was the perfect chance to destroy Copy X once and for all. Who
put a flavor grenade in my mouth? Hold my pen.
That's basically it. But I really like the ending when X admits that after a century of fighting battles without Zero, he just kind of grew numb to the whole thing. And now he wants to leave in peace, at least for a while, and leave the safety of Earth in Zero's capable hands. And that's the story of Mega Man Zero. On paper, I think it works really well. Ever since X3, a big battle between Zero and X has been set up, which we got in X5. There's also a potential case where X is the evil one, as shown in the X7 ending. But when this game was hastily rewritten during development, this is when X being evil was replaced by the Copy X concept. I don't mind Copy X's existence, but there wasn't really much in the way of build-up. I mean, Cyber Elf X reveals that he's not the one doing this, and then CL admits being the one who created Copy X to begin with. There was a lot of build-up to the grand fight with Copy X, since these mechs look just like him that chased after us, and the four guardians built in his image and put up quite a fight, which would set up a really big and challenging boss fight. But ultimately, though, Copy X gets defeated rather unceremoniously, as Zero mocks him for being not nearly as strong and capable as X was. Another thing the story could have done better was the amount of detail they put in. I mean, maybe there's an optional conversation I missed, but we really don't see how most people feel about Neo Arcadia, since we know that the Reploid is being retired by Copy X, which is horrible. But we also know that CL is the only human in the Resistance, so how do other humans feel? Well, we'll have to wait until 04, but this is 01, and this is an area of the story left in the rearview mirror. That's a shame, because what we do have for the Resistance is really interesting. Like Servo, who helps Zero with his equipment and works tirelessly to make sure the Resistance can keep going. Alouetta, a little girl Reploid that CL made to keep her company and helps her stay positive. Or this old Reploid, Andrew, who had once had a woman he greatly cared about, but she grew upset in a relationship since she was growing old, but he was not. That's because he's a Reploid and robots don't get old. So he modified himself to be older, but she's gone now and he is how he is. But characters like Alouetta and Andrew confirming just how blurred the line is.
What, Andrew?
Which, like I said in the X retrospective, is
you better represent.
clear in the classic series. And then Free Will was introduced in the X series, and it'll keep being blurred more and more by ZX and Legends. CL's one of the great characters, and she's very proactive, as she's more or less a leader of the Resistance, doesn't mind putting her own life on the line to save Zero. And she does also feel remorse for having created Copy X despite the good intentions. I also really love Zero in this game. He just feels so no-nonsense. CL was in trouble, she asks for help, intro stage starts. He helps the Resistance because he doesn't like what Copy X is doing. CL realizes it's hopeless as long as Copy X exists, so he says that she won't be happy until Copy X is gone, and he's going to go eliminate her. But they can't get to Neo Arcadia until X cracks their code, and when he does, Zero goes right away, cares for the bosses and guards, and tells Copy X off, saves the day, and there's no anecdote about how they really made a mess, or CL needing to pick up the pace. This Zero is one I can get down with, especially with his ending monologue about him and X being the best partners as he stares in the face of an entire You know, the more I write about the story, the more I grow to love it. But again, it bears repeating, this story is good on paper, and while the execution of the Resistance, X, and Zero are all phenomenal, the forces outside the Resistance are lacking in depth, since Top Thx doesn't have much character, and the four Guardians don't either. But I think they make for entertaining rivals, and I look forward to seeing them develop for the Zero series, since they'll all come back. And except Phantom Weekend, that freaking guy. That's pretty much all I have to
Damn.
say for the story of Mega Man Zero. So
Phantom don't come back.
well, first and foremost, the entire
It's
world
fucked
is
up.
in an art style overhaul. Oh my god, different universe confirmed. No, in all seriousness, the Mega Man Zero series does have its own art style, which includes redesigns for X and Zero, who are the only returning characters. It's not too much to worry about, because within the context of the Mega Man Zero games, this is just how they always look. Everyone just looks much sleeker than before, which I like. A good character design is measured by the silhouette, and you can easily tell this is Zero if you're familiar with his character design for Mega Man X. These designs transfer to the GBA quite well, with good animation, although a lot of the bosses don't have the best animation, but Zero, the guy we're looking at most of the game, did get a lot of attention when it comes to animations, as well not as smooth as X4, certainly more details put in than an X6. The backgrounds vary in quality. I like the environments that look really old and withered, but a lot of the stage backgrounds are just there, like the endless dunes of the sand stage, or the machines in the more patched up areas. The Game Boy Advance is very hit and miss with the music, but one constant is the high pitch of GBA music. Some games do make it work, and others don't, but Mega Man Zero fares in the middle of those extremes. Compositionally, I think Mega Man Zero is really good. I don't think it tops any of the best Mega Man X soundtracks, but if you ask me to listen to the Scorching Desert, or Resistance, Enemy Hall, or Express UG, even in their original GBA forms, I wouldn't raise any objections.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Oh my god, this is actually starting to look like something. Yeah, I started drawing this and I started panicking. I was like, oh no, this looks like garbage.
The full soundtracks for all four games have been officially remastered, and those all take advantage of the extra clarity that wasn't allowed in the GBA and produce better music overall. Now, for the gameplay. Where do I begin? Well, like I said earlier, Zero made his playable debut in Mega Man X3. There, Zero was a stronger, albeit beefier X, so he used his Z-Buster to maximum effect, with the Z-Saber he got in X2 coming into use as the final charge attack. Other than that, he could still dash, wall jump, but of course he had the issue of not being able to interact with game mechanics in a substantial way. In Mega Man X4, Zero was radically overhauled to make his campaign different than X's. Zero now had close quarters combat gameplay with his free/saber and the unlockable combos from the Mavericks. This is just how playing as Zero was, and that continued at X5, Extreme 2, X6, X7, and X8. Mega Man Zero plays no differently than a proper Mega Man X game. Zero can run, jump, dash with the L-Bot, which as I've said in the X reviews is by far the most comfortable placement of it, wall jump, and as a result, this makes playing stages just as dynamic as a good X game. I already said X8 controlled beautifully, and the Zero and ZX games are very much the same. I don't really know how to describe it, just Integrate's just really got the physics right here, and not the Sonic kind. I just mean there should be a certain amount of fluidity when playing these games. X1 to X3 nailed this, and like I said, X8 and the Zero games are even better. There should be some weight when making jumps, but not too much, like the PS1 X games or X7. Good God. So let me make it clear. I enjoy playing this game, but I do have a lot of problems with this one, and that's start right now. The level design of Mega Man Zero is pretty good. I mean, it's very straightforward and easy to understand, but it's not very memorable. Games like X6 really suffer from being pathways with things on them, but Mega Man Zero is certainly not that bad. Within the stages themselves, there really aren't any set pieces I can immediately point to and say, yeah, that was in that one stage. Like the platforms going up and down from Storm Eagle in X1, or the time jumps in Magma Dragoon stage in X4. Usually when there is things on stage that I remember, it probably sucked, like these log carriages in the factory, the sunken Rebel Force ship, nice callback by the way, or the damn disappearing blocks making their return from the classic series, which for some reason you can't wall jump on, or the spike-filled tower climb in the second castle stage. These are just a few examples of poor design though. The rest of the levels are good, but again, nothing particularly stand out. Like the desert level, which is just loaded with enemies, but there's not a whole lot to say about it beyond that. But since the mechanics are so fun to use and fighting enemies is so fun in the Zero games, I can forgive it since it's Inti Create's first shot at a Mega Man game. Since this game game wanted to expand the world of Mega Man, all these levels are actually interconnected. Like when you leave the Resistance base, you're in the first city stage where you probably progress to the right to play the stage. However, to the left is a long walk to the desert stage. It's small world building, but it's still interesting to know how all of our operations are very close by to the home base, since it was established in the story that our teleporter pad can't even go to Neo Arcadia without cracking the code. But established the ludonarrative synchronicity. The game is structured a bit differently than most Mega Man games. We don't have 8 bosses to select, but rather missions from CL to accomplish. And if you aren't a fan of commuting, just asking for the missions is enough to teleport you to the mission start point. This game only has like 5 environments to use for these missions, but they made it interesting. Like how the first time for the factory we need to make our way through the security system, but the second time is the fight with Phantom, he has disabled all that stuff and set bombs to blow up that we need to destroy. Or they'll change the stage, like on the desert level you go all the way to the end of the area, but on the second visit you go down through the sand to find a hidden lab where the Rebel Force ship is crashed. It's frozen in ice the first time, but when we need to revisit the lab, the ice is thawed since we opened the path, and now the ship is a rising and lowering challenge. The train stage does the same, since we need to reach the train first and then ride to the central car, but on the second visit we start off where the train took off and do a great platforming section to reach the boss fight. Stuff like this is really good and very welcome. Most missions end with a boss fight, and I can just say these are some of the weirdest names in Mega Man history. It starts off normal with Aztec Falcon, but then we get Anubis Necromancis and Blizzak Stagroth R. Is that even English? Whatever happened to the simplicity of Storm Eagle or Neon Tiger? Anyway, that's not a big deal. The bosses in Mega Man Zero might seem daunting since they all have 2 or more health bars, but that's only because these guys take so much damage, especially with the redone weakness chain. In Mega Man, the game was designed to be a rock, paper, scissors scenario. Electman's weapon worked against Iceman, his worked against Fireman, and so on. The Zero series takes a very literal approach with this. Aztec Falcon drops the electricity chip, and 2 of the other bosses drop the fire and ice chips. Every boss will be weak to one of these things. Fire works on ice works on electricity, and electricity works on fire. Every boss will be one of these things as well, so it will be clear what the weakness is. Or sometimes not, like the elephant guy who loses the electric chip, but still. Beating bosses with their weaknesses isn't as easy as a badly made X boss, since the patterns don't fully reset, but the damage is so high that the bosses become very easy to brute force. You might still die a lot though, since the damage output bosses have is very high to compensate, but the patterns are usually very simple to get to grips with, so your results may vary. But bosses are made more annoying by other issues in this game. Let's just get to the weapons themselves. When starting off, Zero gets the Z Buster, so if you want to play Mega Man Zero's traditional X game, pick this one. It functions like any other standard buster in the series. Charge shot with 2 levels, standard pellets, and that's all there is to say on that one. By the end of the intro stage, you unlock the Z Saber, which functions just like X4. 3 slashes you can pull off in rapid succession with all the same mobility granted in X4, with being very clear what frames of the animation hit enemies, as well as being able to hit enemies not necessarily in front of you. New to the Z Saber is the ability to slash while running and while dashing, and the ability to charge the Saber for a big slash, which just makes playing as Zero feel even better than it did back in X4 and onward. You can carry 2 weapons at a time. I set the Z-Saber to the main weapon and change the sub-weapon to fit whatever situation I need. And yes, there are only 2 weapons.
Alright,
The triple
so
rod.
yeah.
Zero can use this rod to stab enemies, and also bounce on top of them, which is always cool to see when you can pull it off really quickly. Lastly, there's the shield boomerang, which can reflect enemy bullets, but it doesn't protect against grenades or fire or anything like that, which makes using it very situational and therefore not something I need to use often. All 4 of these weapons are usable with the chips, so don't worry about that. You're very free to experiment here. Also, in the options menu, you can change the controls however you like, but the GBA has 4 buttons, so it doesn't really matter. What does matter are the control types. By default, you hold R to use your sub-weapon, but with Type C, you can press it, and then it will switch with a sound effect playing to indicate a switch. Speaking of sounds, the sound design is very satisfying in the ears with each Z-Saber slash or Z-Buster bullet, but the sound that plays when you collect E-crystals, very good stuff. Back to weapons though, despite there being 4 options, this game is a big flaw that makes the game seem a lot harder out of the gate than it actually is. Scratch that, make this a few. So you'll notice that your Z-Buster and Z-Saber have 1 star out of a different amount. Well, that's because these weapons aren't to the maximum potential at first. What do I mean? Well, the Z-Saber starts off with 1 out of 3 slashes in the combo. The Z-Buster does not allow you to charge up to the 2nd level, and you have to unlock that, as well as unlocking each additional triple rod stab. I'm sorry, but this is just stupid. All this does is serve to waste time, make the game more difficult by hampering my mobility. You upgrade these gradually like a Ratchet and Clank weapon where usage increases ability. Some of these I would be fine with, like you unlock the amazing spinning slash through jump slashes. But why the basic moves like the 2nd and 3rd Z-Saber slash? When using the Z-Saber on, say, Aztec Falcon, you can expect your ass to be kicked because only having 1 slash leaves you open for damage. If you use the Buster without a charge, it does little damage in addition to having to aim the pellets at the right angle to even make make contact. Why not limit upgrades to additional moves, like the X4 power-ups, where you unlock the spinning slash, unlock the uppercut, and so on? 01 has the right idea with the later upgrades, like I said, the spinning slash, or the Z-Buster, where you get 4 shots on the screen at once. But the first few are just tedious for every weapon. So if you want to survive the early game, you better upgrade these weapons. Conveniently, the first stage is a good grinding spot, but why the hell do I have to stand here slashing away and bustering away just to have more pellets on the screen and more slashes for the saber? This is monotonous. The other alternative, like I said, is getting your ass kicked by the boss. It's a lose-lose for the early game, and by the time you get the triple rod just a few missions in, why use it? You already have a decently powered up Z-Saber and Z-Buster, so why get your ass kicked in a desperate attempt to upgrade the triple rod now when dying undoes the progress? And you have better weapon alternatives. I can't think of any other way to look at this other than saying it's crap. Crippling player mobility is a major no for me for game design. So even when I've gotten past that by stage 2, the fact that stage 1 is ruined by this baffling design is a major strike against this game. But that's not the end of grinding in Mega Man 01 though. You might notice your health bar is similarly low to how it was at the start of the next game, but no, heart tanks are gone. In this world we have Cyber Elves, and these are collectibles in this game that come from dropped enemies or Cyber Elf crates. These come in all sorts of variations with 3 main categories: Nurse, Animal, and Hacker. Nurse relates to your health, Animals affect physical performance, and Hackers change data in the game like boss health bars. And you can only take 3 at a time. Problem with the heart tank and sub-tank elves, and yes, sub-tanks can't be found in stages either, is that finding them is only half the battle. These Cyber Elves aren't strong enough and need to be fed energy crystals, which are also collectibles in this game. And you use them to feed Cyber Elves, which brings them up to snuff. But this creates an entirely different issue. Energy crystals are worth almost nothing, so if you want to increase your health or get a sub-tank, you'll be grinding for hours, no, ages, no, eons to get enough, and this is just plainly not fun. In my Mega Man Zero run, I had played every stage, got every drop of E-crystals I could find, grinded for a bit, and I only had enough to fuel 1 health up, when there's like 6. The funny part being, it only took 750 crystals, and it took me the whole game to get that. But the sub-tank elves require 1,200 crystals each. Get out with that bullshit. Who has time to waste for all that anyway? Why did they design it like this? Getting the crystals isn't a bad idea, but couldn't they just reduce the amount needed? Or, you know, up the amount gotten so you don't have to devote your whole life to Mega Man 01 just to stand a chance? What I did was use the lower powered elves that regenerate a bit of your health and use them as makeshift sub-tanks, since I'm not getting sub-tanks in Mega Man 0, it's just something I'll never be able to do. Nor the double health bar, which is achieved by first giving the elf 1,200 elves, and then you need 2,000. Get out game. I think what they were trying to do was prioritizing battling enemies with both these high requirements and the weapon star system for the purpose of making enemies an active part of the game. And believe me, I don't want to be like X7 either. However, I was already fine with the amount of combat at X1, so why do we need to endlessly grind enemies all day? But the third issue in this game is the live system. Oh no. In my Mega Man X8 review, I made a big stink about the retooled live system, but that is better than this garbage. Retry chips made their debut in Mega Man 01, and it was a bad sin that deserved to burn in the fiery abyss of hell. Technically speaking,
Goddamn.
there's a difference between lives and retry chips. What X8 did was limit the number you could carry, and a game over sent you back to the shop to buy more. But X8 had a shop. 01 does not. And so when you run out, your ass is to either find more, but retry chips are less common and girls want to go out with me, that, or you're stuck with 1 life for the rest of the game, maybe just barely eking by with the 1 or 2 retry chips you do find, but you will inevitably lose them because the other issues in this game, like the weapon sucking out of the gate, and the increasing your health is a nigh impossibility. And don't you dare give up when the game gives you the chance after having lost all your chips. Why? Oh, well then the mission is considered a failure and you can't do it again. When 2 missions contain the fire and ice chips that make up 2/3 of the weakness chain. Here's what I did. I saved after every mission, and every time I died before the castle, I reloaded the save file, which is also something you can do upon death, since I wasn't wasting any of my chips. So by then I had 9. But surviving the early game with these shitty things I just discussed makes Mega Man 0 a game I really have a hard time going back to. Whenever I do play it, I'm surprised at how much fun I have with the mid and late game, just because of the these three things. With no room for error in the retry chips, this is what makes bosses harder than they seem because the consequences of losing are so high. Oh, and you gotta love screen crunch deaths. For the most part, Mega Man Zero is designed well enough for under screen size, except for this part we have to jump from Rebel Force ship to another, since it's not even on screen, it's just a leap of faith. Or the more egregious example. Here in the factory, we need to jump from log to log and jump off to destroy the bombs. But then to get back on, you really need to cling on these walls at the very bottom just to have a chance of seeing the ground. And more times than not, into the pit you go. Yeah, get good. But who in the world has fun with things like this? Okay. Time to calm down. Evidently, the devs agreed with me, since a part of the DS collection is the easy scenario, which makes all the games, well, easier. When going into this review, I was going to recommend playing Zero 1 this way, since you don't have to upgrade your weapons, nor grind for energy crystals, nor farm for retry chips, all very game-changing things. But they went so far in the other direction that the game loses all challenge, since spikes are no longer there, and almost nothing poses a real threat to you, except the damn screen crunch. And all cyber elves are unlocked, which means you have 2 full health bars and 4 full sub-tanks, which you will never need because you have so much health and boosted defense. So I can't recommend this either, since like the Rookie Hunter mode in the X Legacy collection, the game ceases to be itself like this. All I really wanted was to boost your default stats, and maybe start off with a few stars unlocked, and not all. Simplifying some cyber elves, but lessen the crystal requirements, and no retry chips. If the easy scenario was just that, I would recommend it in a heartbeat. But it's so easy to the point where I literally beat it in an hour and a half when the GBA version took me 3. All that really leaves is the castle, and I don't have too much to say. And all the stages were pretty good, despite the annoying parts of disappearing blocks in the first or the spikes in the second, which wouldn't be too bad because of the verticality. Falling down is very easy from the enemy fire, which sometimes sends you into a pit. Stage 3 also really stacks up on the enemies. But what I do like is how if you're good enough, you can take an alternate pathway straight to the boss rush. Otherwise, these stages are host to amazing music and some really good boss fights, easily understood patterns, difficult to deal with in execution. I don't know if it was just my skills, but I felt like the bosses were a lot easier in the boss rush, since I took no damage and kicked ass indiscriminately. Oh, and since bosses were so quick and explosions were so brief, I didn't really mind the boss rush. Yeah, that's a first. Except for Phantom. Oh my god, what was that? Literally dying there still counted as beating him, so I'm convinced they literally just did that shit just to eat a retry chip, potentially force you to play the stage again. But luckily I didn't have to, and I made my way to Top DX. In the first phase, he switches between electric armor, and ice armor, and fire armor. You know what to do. The second phase kind of reminds me of Sigma and X1, but it's kind of an anti-climax. I mean, if you get out the door on the wrong foot in this boss fight, you'll probably die, but if you get a good groove going, it shouldn't be a problem. And with that, you've won the game. Yikes, that sounded negative. Well, let me just say, Mega Man Zero 1 is a very fun game. These mechanics are great. The combat is great. I like the boss weaknesses chain. I enjoy the story and characters, and well-designed, quite serviceable. The music and graphics are very well done. But despite this, Mega Man Zero is not a game I can easily recommend, since it has these 3 big flaws going against it that all compound upon each other, which makes the game very unbalanced in its difficulty. On their own, the weapon upgrades and cyber elves can be circumvented, but not the retry chips. However, all 3 of these things combined just make the early game a very tedious experience. And it's for the early game that Mega Man Zero is known for being so difficult when it really isn't. I had a lot of fun with Zero 1, since I'm used to these 3 things and managed to come out on top. The results may greatly vary with your enjoyment. Despite the latter half of the review just being me screaming like I usually do, know that I do enjoy this game. You may as well.
Alright.
The game plays well and is a good package overall. You also might rage quit. I don't know. Mega Man Zero is nowhere near Mega Man X6 or Mega Man X7 in quality, since unlike those games with their crippling issues, Mega Man Zero is a good game, and it comes out on top in spite of its issues, rather than X6, which crashes in endurance because of them. In fact, I'd probably pick Zero 1 over X5 or X8 or most of the classic Mega Man games. But in conclusion, this is a good game with big problems, but trust me, those issues are only going to be addressed as we move forward from Mega Man Zero 2 to Game Boy Advance and DS. Thank you all for watching. I hope you all enjoyed the review, since I think this will be a great marathon. And take care.
Crazy review.
It shouldn't have been hard. It shouldn't have been a job. I wanted to close this retrospective on a high note, but Mega Man ZX Advent finds creative ways to go 2 steps forward and 2 steps back. Mega Man ZX left me feeling kinda empty. It felt like more of the same as previous Mega Man games with the pros and cons coming with it. New ideas ranged from good to bad, and a package I thought was overall worth one playthrough, but nothing more. Mega Man ZX Advent has all the tools at its disposal to make a good game, but they just failed. But I'm getting way ahead of myself. This is the 6th and final episode of my retrospective on Indie Create's first wave of Mega Man game. We started off with the Zero series and Game Boy Advance, which I really loved the progression of, and the rebirth with ZX, which, like I just said, didn't impress me all that much. ZX Advent, I have less memories of than ZX1, since I tried that game on and off before finishing in 2016. I played ZX Advent right after that, and it was quite the blink and you miss it experience. I remember pretty much nothing from this game before going back to it, and here we are today. So let's start Mega Man ZX Advent. The game's story is once again split into 2. One we play as the male, Gray, and the female, Ash. The difference between these 2 is far more substantial than Vent and Ale from ZX1. Vent and Ale had the same exact backstory, and more or less replaced each other in the canon, depending on which one you picked. Their personalities were the same, as well as a few minor differences, but nothing worth getting excited about. Gray starts his campaign as a robot, just released from stasis earlier than expected, as Pandora arrives to erase him since the memory reprogram is not complete. Gray escapes from this facility, but falls into a river before being picked up by the Hunters, a group of people who collect treasure and take missions, I guess. Meanwhile, in Ash's playthrough, she is a hunter and is leading an air raid to find some treasure before being wiped out by Prometheus, before ultimately waking up on Hunter base. You see, what's interesting is that unlike Vent and Ale, Gray and Ash are 2 separate entities. I pointed this out a second ago, but what I mean is that later in Ash's playthrough, she visits the lab from the beginning of Gray's playthrough with signs of a struggle, meaning that Gray existed in Ash's run, but he died at the end of his intro stage. And vice versa. Ash died in her intro stage in Gray's playthrough. So the ZX series is a bit of a split timeline. In Ash's playthrough, she meets an older, more experienced Vent, evidenced by his switch from spiky hair to long, flowing locks. At this point in the story, Gray meets up with Ale, who has longer hair as well. Since Vent and Ale replace each other in ZX1, the timeline split works like this. If Vent is the one who lost his mom in a Maverick raid and works for Zero Express, then he's the one who gets Model X and stops surfing. Later on, Ash just barely survives the air raid, Gray dies at the bridge, and she gets Model A and teams up with Vent. If Ale takes Vent's place, then Gray lives from the bridge fight as Ash dies in the opening. Not that these events are remotely connected, it's just a sequence of events. Now anyway, Grash gets cornered by Prometheus and Pandora looking to settle the score until Model A, a new bottom metal, demands that they mega merge with it to gain the power to fight back, to which they win and begin taking work from the stage Trinity at Legion HQ. Master Thomas, Master Albert, and Master Mikhail. In intentional reference to Dr. Light, Dr. Wow, and Dr. Cossack from the classic games. Master Albert turns out to be the villain all along, no surprise there. It is going to reform this world by finding pieces of Model W. As Grash teams up with Ventil to stop this, the Model W fragments come together to form the Ouroboros, also known as the Damn Donuts from Mega Man X6. You know, at least this game actually says the name and tells you what that is, since X6 left it pretty boned on that front. But anyway, how is the story? I skimmed past the latter part of the game just now, because that's where the problems come in for me. I finally realized just what it is about the ZX games from a narrative point of view that leaves me so disinterested, since that's how I felt about both games. The ZX series is so concerned with setting up backstory and lore in the Mega Man universe, and a lot has changed in between 04 and ZX. I get that, but the problem is that the story these games frame that backstory exposition around is so boring and done before. In the last review, I made us think about the same evolution speech happening at the end that we already got in a lot of the X games and 04. When I saw the first boss of ZX Advent doing the same thing, I just groaned because it's been done to death. It's like when someone tells a really good joke, but once you laugh, they decide to say it every day. It just loses its luster, you know? As for the backstory, this game is way more centered around that than ZX1 even was, since that game at least had Jiro's death, Prairie, the interesting links to MMZ, Ventil's backstory, Serpent's human sacrifice, energy, the works. I mean, ZXA just has you stopping Pseudoroids who work for Master Albert one by one, gradually uncovering the past before the final boss. But as far as conflict goes within the story, after each boss, we learn what was really going on with these Mega Man models, and that is, Albert has made all the Mega Men so that there'd be a Mega Man war between the destined holders of Model H, P, F, and L, and so on to determine the true king of the Mega Man lineage. with each Mega Man model not really caring about how much of a waste of life that truly is. Prometheus and Pandora get more involvement in this game as they were also created by Albert, but they are free thinkers, and so their bodies were made to last a short amount of time, so once they start getting rebellious, they need to go back for repairs and probably be reprogrammed, and that's been going on for a very long time. Hence why they hate Albert and want to destroy him so much, which is a good motivation and possibly the most interesting thing in this story. But again, I feel no urgency when playing this game, or ZX1. Compare this to Zero 2, where Alpaizo steals the baby elves, and they're trying to destroy X and use the Dark Elf to power himself, or the Righteous Strike failure, the Neo-Arcadian counterattack, or in Zero 3, where Wild and Copy X destroyed a whole town to find the Dark Elf, or the time Wild killed Copy X, blamed the Resistance, took over Neo-Arcadia, and all nearby reploids before X saved the day. Or Zero 4, where Area Zero was back from X5 and X6 as Wild was under clear and present danger, with the robot racism commentary not feeling remotely forced. My point here is that there were plot twists, exciting moments, drama, threatening villains, real stakes, and character moments. Learning Zero was a clone and Omega was the real Zero from the X games was a great twist that changed how we viewed the lead-up to and the story of Zero 1. The ZX games feel like Zero 1 from a narrative perspective, but that was before Zero 2 through 4, and this is after, and is therefore lame by comparison. The plot had a lot more intrigue in this exposition fest to begin with, but that's neither here nor there. The whole Mega Man war amongst these people created for that purpose is a neat idea, but I would much rather be playing a game about that, but instead we have to fight Albert on the Ouroboros. Another big reason why I didn't care about the story in this game is because I knew it wasn't going anywhere. After the credits in Extreme Mode, you see a cutscene where Master Thomas was evil as well as Albert, but when Albert turned against them, he aided the hunters in taking him down. But he actually agrees with Albert that the world has gone down the tubes as the centuries have gone on from Classic to X to Zero and now this. Where this was going was that Master Thomas was going to decide to flood the world and start over, which would be a tie-in to the backstory to the Mega Man Legends series. However, because of the problems Mega Man had in the 2000s that I discussed in an editorial a few months back, these games did not sell well, and so we never got a ZX3. I mean, I would have loved to see Ventil and Brash fight against whatever Thomas had planned alongside the Mega Man War, ultimately fighting in vain, since we know the world's going to get flooded in Legends. Yes, I would love to see that. That sounds amazing. It sounds like one of the best and most tragic Mega Man stories ever told, but it didn't happen, and all I'm left with is a truckload of exposition that sets up an event I never got to see. Now, in this current Mega Man revival era, could it happen? Yes. I think the first two Legacy collections leading to Mega Man 11 has shown that. The X Legacy collections will hopefully lead to an X9, with a Legends and Zero Legacy collection hopefully coming to see both the ZX and Legends franchise come back to some kind of conclusion. But as of December of 2018, I'm not going to sit here and speculate. I've got a game to review, and this is it. If you need another reason why this story was so hard to sit through for me, well, reason 3, and this is the final nail in the coffin. ZX1 had some minimal Japanese dialogue, but for ZX Advent, they decided to give it a full English dub. I used to think this was pretty good stuff, but holy mother, I was wrong. I don't even know how to describe this. The quality of the audio is absolutely awful.
Well, how's that lock coming? Not to crack, but I'm almost there.
But then the acting is wooden and awkward with unfitting voices or extras just flat out not trying at all.
For a raider to make it this far is quite something. I accept my thorny embrace. And
Holy
allow your
shit.
soul to be scattered like petals on the breeze. Stay away from me.
Stop! I know what you want.
With that,
Damn.
Are you here to kill me?
Vent and Ale were supposed to sound super wise and mature. They just sound dull and lifeless.
I want to go around the world in a guiding base. There are a lot of things that still need finding.
I just have nothing to say about this other than these performances are just not good. That's that. The soundtrack is similarly weak. I mean, it's not terrible, but it's definitely my least favorite soundtrack in this entire retrospective. Relatively bland composition, okay sound, but it's certainly not something I'd ever listen to, and I'm probably going to forget it within a few days. But I do have my favorite. music before the graphics? Well, I was the subject of audio, so one thing just leads to the next. You know, graphically, Mega Man ZX Advent looks about as good as you'd hope. Again, I really don't want this video to come off as super cynical, but this game came out right after ZX and it looks about the same with some really varied looking boss designs, but the areas themselves rely on a lot of dull colors that make the overall aesthetic come off as dry and drab. Maybe that was intentional, but I don't know. The gameplay is where the real problems start, though. Model A is the first time in this retrospective where the core gameplay style doesn't revolve around Z-Saber combat. Instead, it's just the Buster. When it comes to gameplay differences, in both human and Model A form, Ash can only shoot 2 Buster bullets on the screen at once, whereas Gray can shoot the usual 3. Ash's charge shot's also tiny, but it can ricochet off the walls for a few seconds. Gray also functions in a more standard Mega Man fashion, since he has the usual charge shot. Both have an overdrive attack, sending bullets flying all over the screen, which usually takes a few points off the boss's health bar, so it's pretty useful. I also like the secondary weaponry, can lock on targets and send lightning after them. Beyond that, Model A can dash, wall jump, the works. With the core gameplay down, I want to talk about what makes ZX Advent fail for me, and that can be boiled down to 3 things. 1, the transformations. 2, the line I mentioned at the beginning. 2 steps forward, 2 steps back, and 3, the level design. So let's jump into transformations. In ZX1, the single best element of the game was the biometal system. This allowed for you to have 5 distinct gameplay styles with the same core gameplay, but distinct features that made it worthwhile, and that was great. I've always said that when doing multiple gameplay styles, make sure it plays consistently with the franchise established and is fun in of itself. Something like Zero and X4 or Nero and DMC4 would pass this test. The Panda King and Sly 3 or Big and Sonic Adventure would fail. So Gray and Ash actually transform into the bosses you defeat, and I was already concerned once I beat the first boss, Buckfire, and began playing as him. He can shoot fire darts, which is nice. He goes at decent speed, but he can't wall jump properly. Sure, he can break the ice when you need him to, but is hardly useful outside of that, since I always switched to Model A. But that's only one. But once I unlocked Spark, I knew something was wrong. This guy has an utterly abysmal ground speed, can't defend himself for shit, and can hardly jump off the ground. The one usage is the ability to fly up and across pipes. Honestly, this is the kind of gameplay you'd expect from a bad NES game. This transformation is barely playable, but if you want to increase the uselessness, you then beat a giant fish boss called Chrono Force, and his transformation can swim freely through the water and freeze time, but on the ground is completely immobile. This is... What? I'm sure you've heard this word before. It's called situational. That's the big problem with all the new transformations. They have one special ability, but outside of that, they are completely useless for combat, for platforming, and so on. Later on, you unlock more transformations, such as the Bifrost, the giant lumbering dinosaur that breaks obstacles with his mouth, but you guessed it, he has 0 mobility and can't even pass through doors. Voltron is a skeleton that plays the guitar, and I guess he clears nearby enemies, but he... Wait, what is that running animation? There's like 2 frames! He can balance scales. Yep, that's it. The Queen Bee can lift switches out of the ground and jump several times. The Hedge Shock can roll into a ball and go through gaps. And lastly, the twin gargoyles become one, and you can make a shadow version of yourself and collect power from behind walls. Has my point been made yet? The game has to contrive reasons for these transformations to exist, and that is the definition of sloppy game design. If polls weren't there, I would never use Spark once. The biometals in ZX were utilities. I cannot stress this enough. I never used any of those forms from the last game because I had to. I did because they were useful and therefore I wanted to. If you're going to give me this slow, lumbering Bifrost to crack blocks, then I'm not using them unless you're forcing me to do so. To add insult to injury, the 5 forms from ZX1 are unlockable in this game after the first 3 transformations I listed, and guess what? They are identical to how they played in ZX1, which is a good thing, technically speaking, because those forms were amazing in ZX1, but the new forms suck! So because of this, they get replaced by the good forms. Why would I use Chrono Force to swim when he's a huge target and can't move on the ground? When I have the form that can wall jump, dash, and slash on the ground with great coverage underwater. To highlight how much better the Mega Men were over the bosses? That's terrible design. Oh yeah, Queen Bee can jump infinitely. Good for her. But I'm picking Model 8 with the glide, vertical, and horizontal dash. And oh wait, good ground control. What a concept. Sure, this game has tons and tons of forms, whereas ZX had a max of 7. But in this game, there are 14 forms, and 8 of them are garbage, one-time use gimmicks. 5 of them are identical to ZX1, and one of them is new, but good, that being Model A. But Model ZX is one of the returnees, and since that has the X-Buster and the Z-Saber, you can bet your ass that this replaces Model A for me. All in all, the transformations in this game are absolutely terrible. And yeah, this is quite the strike against the game all about transformations. Alright, so 2 steps forward and 2 steps back, which, in case you didn't know, means that the game makes no headway whatsoever. Boss fights. These were improved in ZX1 since they weren't easy to cheese and still had some real challenge to them. None of that fake stuff I hate in like X6. But in this game, bosses are sometimes decent for the same reason as ZX1, however, if it's not that, then it's a clusterfuck of clones all over the screen, status effects hindering play experience, and sometimes you have to just stand there and do nothing and do it. So this game literally has every single type of Mega Man boss that there is. Subtanks had quite the regression in ZX1 thanks to the terrible drop rate, which I'd say is much improved in ZX Advent, except for the damn final boss stage where for some reason we can't grind health since the enemies are stingy with it. Also, this game introduces just one spot where you can fill your sub-tanks for 50 E-crystals each, which is a great idea. But then there were no save points in sight, and I had to backtrack through 2 whole areas again in order to find a spot to transport, since for some reason every room has a warp point you must pay to use. But the game is really lacking in save rooms that also allow you to transport to these warp points. Like, seriously? Why? Things like this just make me eye roll, and I want to use new features like tag to fill your sub-tanks. ZX Advent has a much better map than ZX1, and better sense of navigation since the map is far smaller, it tells you where to go, and it's filled with a ton of tiny details built for replay value like a Metroidvania should. However, this damn game still has lives, meaning game overs results in going way back earlier in the game to just re-travel to the same points in the map you already did. You also can't restart the mission anymore. You have to go back to the last save, which potentially could have been several missions ago. But the end of it all is the lamentably miserable level design. ZX Advent isn't just doing standard Mega Man X fare, dashing and wall jumping. I'm telling you, they really love
This guy's really tearing into the game. Holy shit.
like the Floating Ruins Area 3 or the Waterfall Ruins Area 3, where spikes came clean out of nowhere, under me or above me, what have you. These are just beginner's traps to get over it, but again, dying is such a high consequence with the freaking backtracking. They also put in surprise hits when this is a Metroidvania. How am I supposed to know in the damn maze, every great Mega Man game needs one of those by the way, that this is a pit, when plenty of other examples exist where you just drop down? I mean really, that's it. The level design's just dull or filled with blind sides to make the game drag out even more than it already does. With the final stage, yet again, being an obnoxious gauntlet filled with spikes, barely any health, a 2-phase final boss, another abysmal boss rush, and you have to do it with whatever subtanks you have and however many lives you have left, and I just don't care. I quit. Yeah, I beat the game, but I'm ending this review right now. For what reason? Well, it's because playing the awful boss rush in ZX Advent just hit me like an 18-wheeler. I had a sudden realization. I don't want to talk about the easy final boss stage with no chance of recovering sub-tank energy anymore. Mega Man ZX Advent suffers from the same problems as so many Mega Man games. At this point, the nonsense story about the new generation, the awful boss rush in the same stage as the final boss, lives in a Metroidvania, crappy power-ups, you name it, these things have become standard. My journey reviewing the X series, the Zero series, and the ZX series has shown me that Mega Man had so many chances to improve, but they never learned. They never took the hint, stepped back, and reevaluated how they made these games. Mega Man just time and time again just did the same thing, dwindled in sales, and died. What I said in the Future of Mega Man editorial a few months ago holds more true than ever. Mega Man died because the games just never improved. And how can you when there's a strict deadline at 6 games a year? Don't tell me whose fault it was. Just look back at Mega Man in the 2000s and see how crystal clear it is now as to why Mega Man died, and be happy we're in a new era where quality seems to be the priority. Is my opinion fact? No, but I'm just frankly tired of the same mistakes over and over again. I thought this was just me being sick of Mega Man, but I realized that this is not true, so I just went back and did another playthrough of Mega Man and Bass, a game that I love, and I enjoyed it just as much as ever before as both characters. I'm confident that if I reviewed X4 today or Zero 3, they would have been the same videos as they were when they were originally released, leaving me with only one conclusion. Mega Man ZX Advent just sucks.
Damn.
Zero 3. It only makes me sad since the Zero series strive for new ideas and great stories. I don't love Zero 4, but would I play it any day over the ZX series? Sure would. Do I want the ZX games to continue? Well, as I said in the story review, I think there's a lot of potential there, but I want to see some major gameplay changes before I get hyped about that. I didn't want this retrospective to end on such a downer, but that's how it is sometimes. What more can I say? Hope you all got what you were hoping for from this retrospective. I mean, despite this review's tone, I loved working on it, despite not enjoying the ZX games that much. But that's the end. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Hey, you! Do you want to remain a speed running forever? Subscribe to Reploid Revo and show me what you're made of.
Reploid Revo is brought to you by these contributors on Patreon. If you'd like to see more content like this more often, as well as original content, consider becoming a patron today for exclusive content, assets, and early access. Want to show your support and get a piece of Revo for yourself? Check the links below for merch and other items. Hunter of the 21XX era had fought long and hard to protect the world from Mavericks, and whatever other threats humanity and Reploids may face. However, after realizing that Zero himself was the cause of the spread of the Maverick virus, which led to such large-scale terrors such as the Reploid and living virus Sigma and the Nightmare virus, Zero decided that enough was enough, and turned himself over to the Maverick Hunters, and in fact he and some scientists
Alright, let me look at this again.
so that perhaps a cure could be found. Rather than allow himself to inadvertently spread the virus wherever he went, he would now make the ultimate sacrifice to ensure it could be cured. Sure enough, an as of yet named brilliant female scientist, as well as the genius Reploid researcher, Dr. Wilde, both managed to combine their efforts and develop what would become known as the Mother Elf. The Mother Elf is a sentient being made up of data and energy, able to exist in both the physical world and the mysterious parallel dimension known as cyberspace. By manipulating cyberspace, the Mother Elf
Man, I
is
really
able
wish
to
I could
influence
find
the
that.
world, effectively granting her
I want to draw that
reality
so
over
bad.
But most importantly, this afforded her the ability to completely cure all Mavericks on a massive scale. Maverick Hunter X, who had become a world leader at this point, as well as the most elite Maverick Hunter in the world, held talks with the world governments and authorities in power to discuss how to use this new and next power.
Yeah, let me see. Maybe it's a stealth jet?
The Mother Elf to cure all Mavericks in the world,
I doubt it.
Ultra Mavericks.
I've already looked into the J20s, J30s, J35s. it's similar. J31 Falcon, I looked at it, but it's not it.
However, proposed that the Mother Elf be used to control all Reploids in the world, eliminating their free will, led by a single all-powerful Reploid who can harness the Mother Elf's power. Even with no more
Look at that.
perfection,
Those things are sexy.
Reploids could still use their free will to defy humans, which was a risk Wild did not want to take.
See, like, what is this?
Project LPs. X's plan won out, however, and was given executive authority to use the Mother Elf. When Sigma managed
Stingray?
to avert the Eurasia colony crash by infecting the entire world with this virus in a single day, the Mother Elf was able to reverse in about the same amount
That
of
would
time.
makes a little bit too much
The majority
sense.
of mavericks in the world suddenly ceased to exist, reverting back to their
What?
normal state. For a brief period in history, the world enjoyed peace, prosperity, and coexistence between humans and reptiles. However, this was not good enough for Dr. Wilde. By amassing conspirators who shared his sentiments, Dr. Wilde set in motion a series of schemes which allowed him to create 2 copies of the Mother Elf, known as the Baby Elves, as well as obtain Zero's original body, which was still separated from his mind for study. Using this body,
Yeah, like, this isn't it. And it's a bunch of concept art. It's cool, but, like, I'm trying to make my own shit. I'm just trying to derive from reality. Dude, these wings are folding like the way I thought. Why didn't I look into these before?
This sparked a war in the later half of the 21XX era, which would become known as the Elf Wars. So named because it was fought using cyber elves, sentient programs that shared similar powers to the Mother Elf, all born from her initial design. The goal of this war was to obtain the Mother Elf and combine her power with Omega so that Wild could control all Reploids on the planet and enforce Project LPs on the world as he originally intended. With X and the Maverick Hunters,
I mean, this is close, but still,
Zero's
no.
body was placed into a copy body, which was virtually identical to the one that Omega was currently occupying and had stolen.
This is so sad.
Together, X and
I
Zero
can't find
embarked on
it.
one last mission to stop Omega and Wild. Together, they were able to take down Omega, but could not destroy him. Instead, his body was restrained and his powers kept sealed, as he was sent into orbit around Earth for all eternity. In just 4 short years, 60% of all humans were eradicated from the world, and 90% of all Reploids lost their lives. The face of the planet was forever devastated as a scorched Earth where no life could prosper. All but one place known as Neo Arcadia, the last major piece of civilization. Dr. Wilde was apprehended, and for destroying the world, he was placed inside of a cybernetic body, which would keep him alive forever, cursed to wander the wastelands that he created, never to be allowed back into civilization again. The humans of the world would come to respect X, and grew to see him as their leader, as he helped set humanity back towards recovery from within Neo Arcadia. As ruler of Neo Arcadia, X was kind and just, and it seemed that the world was finally at peace once again. Zero, on the other hand, would go back into hiding, sealed away in a lab once more to continue the studies, never to be disturbed, trusting that X had things under control from here. However, Wild was not yet finished. Somehow, Wild had managed to curse the Mother Elf, turning her from good to bad. Her powers were soon going to peak, and she would wreak havoc and devastation on the planet once again. While the Mother Elf was being held in Yggdrasil, a sealing facility for her powers, she began to surge with energy and would break free to cause chaos and destruction again. But
Here we go.
using his body as a sort of lock,
Let's
he
try
sat
this.
down on the solid throne inside of Yggdrasil and used his body to hold back the Mother Elf's powers, now known the Dark Elf. The strain of holding back such immense power shattered X's mind, but his body was all that he needed to restrain the Dark Elf. With X gone, the governments of Neo Arcadia needed to uphold the illusion that X was still alive and well, or else panic would ensue that once again the world was seemingly in peril. A brilliant young scientist known as Ciel was tasked with creating a replacement for X, known as Copy X. Indistinguishable from the original, Ciel had created the world's first perfect copy of Mega Man X. However, the one thing she couldn't copy was X's soul. For a time, Copy X was a good ruler, following in the original X's footsteps. But over time, he became corrupt, and began to prioritize the health and safety of humans over Reploids. You see, there was an energy crisis at hand, and Copy X's solution to it was to deprive Reploids of the energy they needed to live, and give it to the humans instead. For the humans who had come to idolize the real X, this was paradise, but for the Reploids, it was hell on earth. Any Reploid seeking to leave Neo Arcadia, or even so much as try to put their own well-being above humans, was marked as a maverick. Feeling guilt for the monster that she had inadvertently created, Ciel chased from Rumor to find the resting place of Zero. With a handful of defectors who had also escaped from Neo Arcadia to join her, she and her team found Zero in an abandoned lab, decrepit and badly damaged. As Neo Arcadian soldiers gave chase, Ciel was out of time to properly revive Zero and make the necessary repairs. Giving up her life, Patsy, Ciel's nurse-type cyber elf, used her powers to revive Zero. Awakened and fully repaired, Zero immediately sensed the danger coming for Ciel and himself, and defeated the Neo Arcadian forces. However, all was not well. Zero seems to have lost his memories, barely even knowing who he is himself. Nearing the exit to the lab, Ciel is grabbed by a golem, an old war machine from the Elf Wars. Zero tried his best to damage the beast with his buster shot, but it was no match for its tough armor. Suddenly, a computer in the lab boots up, and a familiar voice comes from the screen, offering Zero a lost weapon, but one all too familiar to him, the Z-Saber. Picking it up, Zero is quickly able to destroy the golem and rescue Ciel. Once safely back to the rundown resistance base, Ciel makes her case to Zero, pleading for him to help in the fight against Neo Arcadia and to stop Reploid oppression. Zero agrees and sets forth on his new mission, memories or not, following what he knows to be right in his heart. No matter the time, no matter the place, no matter the circumstances, Zero will always protect those in need.
Dun, 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 dun.
This iteration of Zero appears to be 5 foot 2 inches tall. We know this because by measuring the Photocopiya Mega Man model kit, which is a 1/10 scale kit, we can extrapolate his actual height. I'll spare you the math, but basically comparing the scales and heights of Mega Man and Zero for these kits, we arrive at 5 foot 2 inches. According to Mega Man X official complete works, Zero's original body was 5 foot 7 inches tall. That is to say, his X series body. Given that we have hard numbers to go by, and model kit scales and book sources to cross-reference, this confirms that Zero actually did undergo a literal physical change between his X-era body and the one that he has in Mega Man Zero, proving that this new look is not just an art style change, but a measurably different body. Just watch the Wonder Buster. Moving on, Zero, of course, still has his trademark blonde hair, although it seems to no longer be in a ponytail, judging by the lack of a band around the back, and seems to simply spill out of the back of his helmet. It also is not nearly as thick and has a tendency to splay out more. Zero's eyes have also changed slightly, moving from their usual blue to light blue in X8, and back to this darker purple-blue hybrid in Mega Man Zero. Most notably, Zero's armor has been stripped away to seemingly appear as thick clothes. His trademark chest plate has been replaced with what seems to be a jacket resembling the style of the era, as Ciel also wears a similar jacket but in pink. Zero's arms are also no longer simple cylinders in shape, covering rods and pistons, but instead are actual synthetic muscles which can flex and bend. This new, sleeker style of Reploid body is universal in that all Reploids seem to now resemble humans but wearing armor. At a glance, it's impossible to tell them apart. Zero's only remaining gem now on his body seems to be greenish in tint now, rather than its original blue color, but retains the same shape and placement on his forehead. As far as Zero's physical abilities go, he retains all of the same abilities that his X-Series counterpart had, including a dash, despite no longer having dash jets on his feet, wall kicking, chargeable weapons, and other such abilities. However, some obvious differences are present. Zero, who had been using his built-in arm-mounted Z-Buster less and less, has now swapped it out for a handgun which functions virtually the same, now called the Buster Shot. Please note, in the original release of Mega Man Zero 1, this handgun was mistakenly called the Z-Buster. All future games This Buster Shot can actually hold Zero's Z-Saber, which slots into the slide part of the gun, enabling the ability for charge shots, which the Buster Shot cannot perform on its own if the saber is not slotted in. This could mean that by the time of the Elf Wars, weapons like X and Zeros had become standardized. It would only make sense to give as many soldiers weapons as powerful as theirs in the middle of such a devastating war. Speaking of the Z-Saber, that too has undergone some radical changes. Described as incorporating Mega Buster Mark 17 technology into its design, the Z-Saber can now also hold a charge, just like X's X-Buster. This enables the saber to be charged up and release explosive energy in the form of a slash attack, which creates a splash of energy, upwards and forwards, disintegrating anything caught in its path. And most obviously, of course, the Z-Saber now has a triangular-shaped blade. Sabers in the X series seem to have a variety of blade types. We've seen the unruly and powerful fluid-style blades, which resemble flames and electricity, creating large slashes through the air when they're swung.
Hey, kickstand. I'm chilling, man. I'm actually super tired, winding down, finishing up this last bit. And a little bummed out, I can't find the plane, man. I cannot find it no matter what I do. I found this plane. Oh, sweet. That's what's up, man. See, the other day when I was just like looking up random planes, I found this picture and it was super dope. I wanted to draw it because it reminded me of manta rays. So I was like, alright, let me draw these so that way I keep the idea of manta rays in my head while I draw these things. And I really love this plane because it has 8 wings. It has 4 wings on each side and then no fins up top. So I was like, I just got done like researching stealth fighters and I still couldn't find it. But I found something similar, so I started drawing it and I figured, you know, it's going to be good enough for now. Because this one has 6 wings, but one of them is like the fins up top. It just kind of morphs off of the side of the jet here. So it's really interesting, but not the one I was looking for, you know?
Even though the sprites for the saber and even the Buster Shot do not necessarily match the in-game sprites, the implication is that they are intended to look the way they do in the art.
Panda using a flute, that's what's up.
The Z-Saber comes a whole slew of new weaponry developed by Servo of the Resistance. Using the existing
I like pandas, man. I actually love pandas.
Create variations of Zero's saber. The triple rod was one of the first. Effectively, this weapon turns the Z-Saber into a spear, which can be extended up to 3 times using a telescoping handle. Each time it is extended, there is a short burst of thrust that comes from the shaft of the weapon, ensuring powerful stabs. Zero can also aim the spear directionally and hit enemies coming at him from any angle. Zero can also jump and aim the spear directly downwards and bounce off of enemies repeatedly if he is skilled enough. When charged, however, the rod is spun at a high speed, and the second blade seems to emit from the back, turning it into a double spear, which can hit targets.
So yeah, man, that sounds exciting.
This weapon, however, was then improved upon again by Servo, turning it into the chain rod. Instead of 3 long segments, the triple rod now separates into many smaller segments, each separated with a blade, and has increased reach, turning it into a sort of whip and grappling hook style weapon. As before, Zero can aim the chain rod in any direction, but can also pull objects and enemies towards him that are impaled on the end of the chain. Furthermore, if Zero aims the chain rod at a wall or ceiling, he can grapple onto it and swing from it. As before, when charged, the rod retracts into a solid rod and is spun exactly the same way as the triple rod. The third iteration of the rod-type weapons is the recoil rod. Now, instead of a spear or chain-type weapon, Zero is equipped with a pair of tonfa-like weapons, which produce a rapid stabbing motion as Zero throws left and right punches repeatedly. Like always, the weapon can be aimed in all directions. However, when charged, the recoil rod releases a massive burst of energy and can punt enemies and objects away at high speeds until they crash into a wall and are destroyed by the impact. Should Zero point this weapon at a wall or floor, he will be flung himself in the opposite direction, allowing for very large jumps. Perhaps the one weapon that has changed the least across all Mega Man Zeros shield boomerang. As the name implies, it is a shield weapon
There we
made
go.
up of spinning
Alright.
energy, which can deflect shots.
So let's try this now.
When charged up completely, the shield can be thrown for devastating damage, and will loop back towards Zero to catch. This unique mix of defense and offense can be extremely useful when used properly. Finally, Zero is also given a unique weapon, unlike all the others, known as the Xeno. Contrary to what it sounds like, this is not a punching weapon. Instead, Zero now has a special chip implanted in his palms, which allows him increased arm strength, which can be used to grab, rip, and tear weapons off of enemies, or just completely destroy them. When encountering an enemy with a shield, for instance, Zero can yank the shield right off of them, exposing them to damage. If an enemy has a gun mounted on them, Zero can destroy the enemy and keep the gun part for himself, allowing him to turn their own weapons against his enemies. Furthermore, his increased grip and arm strength allows Zero to rip away environmental hazards, such as vines and debris, faster than if he were to just spend his time slashing away at it. Its usefulness is debatable, but when holding the right weapon for the right situation, it can make or break a mission. Another interesting change is that Zero seems to have new innate abilities. Rather than the traditional learning system that Zero used in the past, Zero can now learn EX skills for defeating bosses. Based on the game we're playing, however, the conditions to learn these skills vary.
Pan boot.
Nevertheless, Zero can now learn
Panda
new
Pokemon,
techniques
grass
that are not
type.
necessarily directly based on the boss that he has defeated. Some techniques
Nice.
are universal and carry over between games, such as rolling slashes, rising slashes, and other special kinds of buster shots, and even blade moves, all of which are influenced by what kind of element Zero is equipped with at the time. This means that Zero may be able to perform a rising slash attack, but when equipped with a fire element,
Yeah, man,
his
Pan
rising
boot's cool.
slash now becomes a flaming rising slash.
I can kind of see him,
I almost forgot to mention,
kind of like a
in the Zero series, there is a new system for
panda.
which relies on neutral
I think they have round ears, right?
fire, and ice. These act as modifiers for all
And
sorts of
then
attacks and often radically changes the function of
kind
the
of
EX
eyes
skills.
closed.
It's rather complicated and changes drastically between the games, so to keep things simple for now, just know this. EX skills are techniques that can be learned from beating bosses. They may not be based on the boss that was defeated, and may appear in multiple games. Elemental chips can modify the behaviors of these skills, and some cannot be performed at all unless the correct element or form is equipped. Zero also obtains an ability called Forms, which are not always used in every game. Forms are basically modifications to Zero's body, which enable new abilities. Some of these abilities are extremely useful, while others are barely noticeable.
I like it.
For instance, the Rising form allows Zero's third slash in his Saber combo to be an upward slash, which does not reach as far forward, but does reach higher above him. As best I can tell, this does not do any more damage than a normal slash and covers less area around Zero.
Oh, this is an ugly bear.
So, its usefulness is debatable. Admittedly, though, I found myself using this form the most just because it looked really cool. Most useful forms offer Zero's abilities, such as increased defense, running speed, and other movement options not normally available to him. Some offer him double attack power at the cost of taking double damage. Some even offer him all the powers of every other form at once. It's certainly a unique system, but it's not consistent across the games. Possibly as part of this system, in Mega Man Zero 3, it is possible to acquire special parts for each part of Zero, such as his boots, chest, and head, allowing for a combination of augmentations, like double jumps, increased defense, and increased effectiveness from pickups. In all, Zero has many familiar
Oh, this is so dumb.
but as we
I'm sure yours is gonna look a million times better.
features to show that he is leagues apart. These powers are certainly needed to face the new threats in the year of 22XX. Make use of your weapons wisely and adjust your loadout accordingly. Zero's personality in Mega Man Zero has not changed too much from the Mega Man X era. Aside from his loss of memory, we come to find that Zero is still the same Zero we know and love, which is actually a major point of the overall plot of these games. One thing I have noticed, however, is that Zero is a lot more serious and on edge in these games, even going so far as to appear angry and sometimes harsh when speaking to others. In one exchange between Zero and Ciel, Ciel speaks up about something important, and Zero essentially yells at her to keep quiet. While I understand that the situation was tense, it definitely seems like he could have worded things better.
that he apologized to her after that exchange. Throughout all four games, however, there is an underlying tone of seriousness and solemn silence that Zero has carried with him. His whole attitude seems to be a general sense of anger and doom. I can't say I blame him, however. He woke up missing his memories in a world destroyed by an unknown enemy, and has found out that the evil dictator currently making life miserable for his species was once his best friend. That's kind of a lot to process. Zero is very much learning how his new world works, while working through the frustration of not knowing who he is, how he got there, and what he's going to do.
Yeah, I'd have to give it a whole lot more stabs.
The world is asking him for favors that only
Trying to remember the last time I drew a
he
panda.
hasn't even figured out his name yet before being asked to save the world. That must surely weigh heavy on anyone's head. But rather than go into these new challenges with confusion and whining, Zero simply grips his saber and makes sure to keep his resolve through it all. So what may appear as a cold and unfeeling exterior at first could simply be the result of Zero trying to come to grips with his new surroundings with dignity and purpose. As the games carry on, Zero
Can't remember what their faces look like.
and who he was as a person. When confronting Copy X at the end of Mega Man Zero 1, Zero states that he must be fighting a copy because he knows in his heart.
Yeah, for sure, man. Shoot me a picture, because mine is looking like trash.
His mind has forgotten, his body remembers the booming strength of X, and that this imposter couldn't possibly live up to his legacy. Zero keeps strong friends as his company and holds them to a high standard. Bits and pieces of his memory start to come back to him as the game series progresses, until it's finally revealed in Mega Man Zero 3 that Zero is actually in a copy body, and Omega is using his original body. Perhaps as a show of Zero's maturity and resolve, when faced with the task of destroying his own body, he shows no hesitation. Materialistic Dr. Weil is shocked at this, showing that he only values Zero as a tool. But Zero understands that it is his heart and soul that makes him who he is, and not just his body. This is proof enough as he manages to foil Weil and Omega using nothing but an imitation body. Ironically enough, the thing that Copy X was missing to be great was not his body, no matter how perfect of a copy it was, or the strength that he was built with, but the heart that the real X had, retroactively proving Zero's point, a lesson that Copy X was too late to learn. Zero can be summed up as thus in the Mega
Oh, let me get back to this plane.
regardless of the
I've been drawing planes all day, so now
or body he inhabits,
I have no bear anatomy in me at the moment. But yeah, that sounds dope, man. Reminds me of a Jigglypuff, which is one of my favorites from back in the day.
As long as he can keep doing that, nothing else matters. Initially, Mega Man Zero was intended to be a one-off game. Furthermore, the original story for Mega Man Zero featured Zero fighting the real Mega Man X, and not Copy X. The reason for this was not known, outside of there being a big twist at some point. Speculation for why this could be is that after 100 years of fighting and ruling over humanity in Neo Arcadia had made X jaded. The change from real X to Copy X was made very late in the production of the game in response to Capcom developing Mega Man X6, unbeknownst to the series leader, Keiji Inafune. Due to the change in story from X5 to X6, Inafune had to make several changes to the plot of Mega Man Zero so that the continuity of the games would make sense. One of these changes was to replace the real X with Copy X. It's possible that upon second thought, the team felt that players would not respond well to fighting the real Mega Man X as a villain, when he had been such a beloved hero all the time before. One thing to note, however, is that Cyber Elf X seems to have still been a plot point in this original draft of the story. How Cyber Elf X could exist at the same time as real X ruling Neo Arcadia is unknown. How did Cyber Elf X become separated from the real X? However, what this does imply is that the story we are given in Mega Man Zero is actually still very close to the original draft. The only major change is that real X is simply called Copy X, and CL is credited with his creation. Further evidence that these changes were made last minute is the discrepancy in the sprite for Copy X versus the mugshot image of him when he speaks. Copy X has Mega Man Zero era ears on the parts of his helmet, just like Zero has, but his mugshot image shows X-era ear cups instead. This could be a holdover from when X was intended to be the real Mega Man X instead of a copy, as all of the mugshots for the game that
appear to be drawn artwork and not sprites that can be easily edited. As mentioned earlier, the Z-Saber in the first two games is a normal kind of sword blade, despite all of the artwork showing a triangle-shaped blade. There is also some artwork for Mega Man Zero which sometimes depicts Zero using two sabers at once, despite him only having one saber in his possession. However, Servo seems to imply that he built the Rod family of weapons from Zero's Z-Saber technology. So perhaps Zero has one saber given to him by Cyber Elvex in the abandoned lab, and maybe Servo gives him a second one that can transform into the Rod-type weapons. And that during gameplay, we only see Zero use a single saber. But
Perfect,
perhaps
man.
the Rod weapons can also convert into a regular Z-Saber. Furthermore, Zero also has two holsters on his thighs, which seems to fit the Z-Saber handle versus the holster Zero originally has on his backpack in his X-Series design. Further evidence that this is not just an art style change, as Zero would have to physically holster his weapon differently. No such holster seems to exist for Zero's Buster, however. Earlier, I mentioned how Zero can dash without the use of dash jets embedded in his feet. This implies that perhaps Zero is dashing as a sort of forward leap, or some other form of propulsion not visible to the naked eye. There is even a soft footstep sound when initiating the dash. One nifty feature of Mega Man Zero that I wish was implemented into all Mega Man games is that when performing a dash wall kick, Zero will use a different wall kicking sprite than usual. Instead, Zero will look as though he is performing a leap off of the wall, facing away from it, to emphasize the strength in his push off from the wall. This kind of sprite looks especially impressive when performing successive wall kicks left and right up a wall, but is sadly missing from Mega Man ZX and all other Mega Man X games. In all games besides Mega Man 0 1 through 4, dash wall kicks only produce a normal wall kicking animation. When performing an aerial attack in Mega Man 0, if the player holds down the attack button and the down button, Zero will keep his weapon extended during his fall instead of retracting it back. This allows for a continuous attack on your path down. When Ciel finds Zero in the abandoned lab, Zero is missing both of his arms and his jacket, showing that the jacket he wears is additional armor, but not necessarily part of his body and can be removed, exposing a black-colored body beneath. Why Zero is missing his arms and jacket is unknown, though it could be that for security reasons, Zero was disarmed following the Elf Wars so that study on his body could be continued. This would also explain why his Z-Saber was kept in a compartment in the lab and given to him by Cyber Elf-X, who seemed to be living in the computer nearby in the event that Zero wakes up. Also of interest is that the abandoned lab has sprite data not normally visible during gameplay, which references something from Zero's past. Seen here via hacking the camera to show the full destroyed wall of the lab, there is a warning logo that resembles the logo seen on canisters found in Zero's warehouse, where Sigma first fought with him.
Yes, I have a Discord. It's somewhere.
This could mean that the warning logo seen on the wall
I have a Discord. The link might be on my. It might be on my bio. Let me check real quick. Because I usually have
Anytime you defeat an enemy with a Z-Saber, they split in half along some angle before exploding. This is even true for
I usually have it somewhere, but I believe I have one. There we go.
This happens for any bladed weapon, including the shield boomerang. But weapons like the Rod-type weapons are excluded. Shooting bosses and enemies, though, results in no outward damage, and they simply explode. In Mega Man 02, when fighting Thx Nardacci, he has a chance of performing an attack where he summons 4 specters of replicas closely tied to Zero's past. These 4 specters are Vile.
Yeah, I guess not. I know I have my Discord posted on my whatever. I'll have to send it to you.
Because he was one of the X-Hunters who stole his parts. Colonel, because he was Zero's friend, rival, and then enemy during the events of X4.
Yeah, I don't have it on me right now. I have it available for like Patreon and all that other stuff. The link would be on there somewhere, or maybe it just like gives you access to it. But yeah, I'll send you a link on Twitter to my Discord once I have my laptop up, because I'm gonna wrap up the stream in a little bit right now. So once I'm on my laptop, I'll definitely have the.
However, the shield is featured in his artwork. This could mean that
I'll definitely have it
in events not depicted in the
and send it over to you.
Zero once confronted Vic during the events of the Dopplertown incident. Maybe Zero destroyed Vic's shield, which is why we never see him fighting X with it? Who can say for sure why these four were chosen? Zero, in his Mega Man Zero form, has appeared in several fighting games, one of which was Onimusha Blade Warriors. In this side-scrolling Smash Bros. Style fighting game, Zero is an unlockable character with a handful of different forms, as seen in Mega Man
Awesome, man.
which was the latest Zero.
Yeah, it sounds good.
Another
So
was in Capcom vs. SNK Chaos, a fighting game.
yeah, how do we do this? There we go. It isn't great. I'm sure it's fine, man. As long as it works for you, that's what's important. You know, like everything that I'm working on here, it's not the greatest stuff, but it's me getting the ideas out so that way I remember it. And like all this stuff means something to me, like not to my heart, but like to my mind, you know what I mean? So that way when I revisit these sketches, I'll be like, oh yeah, that's right, da 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 da. Because, you know, this is gonna be a long project that I'm working on. So yeah. So yeah, man, let your drawing serve you. Let me see what a panda looks like, see if I was even close. Oh, they have black around the eyes and black around the ears. That's right. So then this. So yeah, this line here would have been the cutoff point. There we go. Now it looks more like a panda. Of course I was completely off on that. That's dope, man. It sounds like you're on your way. Find out what you like about it and then try to recreate it, you know? That's gonna be the trick. Well, I'm glad we were able to clear that up. Clip the panda's head there. And other than that, I think that's gonna be it, man. That's gonna be the end of this episode. I'm super tired. It's like 5 o'clock in the morning here. So I'm going to close this down and go to sleep soon. But aside from that, I want to thank you for stopping by, Kickstand. Thank you, Nardacci, for the raid earlier. I was super unprepared for that. And yeah, for everyone else who's sitting by and watching these things and who stopped by, man, thanks for watching. Of course, man. Thanks for watching me like struggle with all these airplanes and not know what I'm doing. Yeah, it's East Coast time. So yeah, man, that's gonna be the end of this episode of the Andrew Glowczewski Experience, episode 215. Working on these airplane stuff, trying to get this special jet that has the engine run below the wing in the front, but above the wing in the back. And I don't know. Hopefully one day I'll find that airplane and you know, really get to go ham and got to establish at least a dual seating cockpit. So, or side by side, you know, like a lateral cockpit. So that's cool. So yeah, man, we got a lot done tonight. And you were there for all of it, Kickstand. So yeah, definitely shoot me, or I'll send you that Discord link, and yeah, I want to see this panda you're talking about. Other than that, that's gonna be it, man. Love y'all. Peace.